Good evening. Tonight, Monday, March 8th, 2021, this is the Select Board and Licensing Commissioners. This is a live broadcast. So pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, GLC 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that can gather in one place, this meeting of the North Andover Select Board will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting may be found on the town's website at www.northandoverma.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so on their televisions by tuning to Comcast Channel 8 or Verizon Channel 26 or online at www.northandovercam.org. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the Town of North Andover website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of the meetings as soon as possible after the meeting. So I call to order the meeting. We have everybody here, so we don't have to do roll call. You can see us all. How about that? And so our first item is public comment. And again, because of Governor's orders, we accept comments via www.northandoverma.gov/SB public comments. And Madam Town Manager, do we have any public comments tonight?
Mr. Chair, we do have 3 public comments tonight. 2 are in relation to the conveyance from the Center Realty Trust, and 1 is regarding the 114 project. If it pleases you, I can hold these until we get to those items.
I think that might make sense, that we've got context with it.
Perfect.
So let's do that. Okay, which then brings us to our first new business, which is the Route 114 corridor improvements. And we have a Mass DOT presentation and very excited about that. So if you would introduce yourself, please.
Got the mute thing there. So my name is Charles Gregory. I'm with GPI. I'll be presenting the project tonight.
Great.
Larry Cash, Project Management Section, Mass DOT Boston office.
Thank you.
I'm going to share my screen right now. Hopefully, is everybody able to see it?
Yes.
Super. All right. So hello, everyone, and thank you for your time tonight so we can present the 114 Corridor Improvements Project to you. Our hope is that you will have a better understanding of the project purpose and need, as well as the proposed improvements, their impacts, and project schedule. As you know, Larry Cash is the MassDOT project manager. Again, my name is Chuck Gregory, and I'm the project manager with GPI. Also with me tonight is Joe Johnson, who is our traffic lead for the project, and Ron Hedrick, who is our landscape architect here at GPI. I also wanted to give a quick thank you to Jim Stanford, Gene Enright, and Andrew Shapiro, among others with the town, who have been very instrumental in getting us to this point in the project. So we plan to review with you the existing conditions, the purpose and need of the project, proposed improvements and project impacts, as well as proposed schedule, and we will have time at the end for questions. This slide shows many of the deficiencies along the corridor that we currently have. And here's the corridor. It extends from west of Waverly Road all the way to just to the east of Mill Road. It's approximately a little over 2 miles. and it also includes side road approaches to the corridor. There's 9 intersections along the corridor, and of note, 5 of these intersections are HSIP eligible, meaning that they are in the top 5% for crashes in the region. Taking a look at Waverly Road, there is reduced capacity at the intersection, and this is by and large due to only having one eastbound travel lane or through lane. And there is a lack of a center turn lane to the east of Waverly Road. Highlighting the area between Peter Street and Andover Street. One of the biggest concerns here is that we have a high-speed right turn for cars turning onto Andover Street. Also, from a capacity standpoint, there aren't any dedicated through lanes for there at Peter Street. Going east over to the Andover bypass intersection, there are several issues that stand out at this intersection. We have an unconventional jug handle for left turns and U-turns. We have a high-speed right turn lane for cars headed to the Andover bypass. We have poor intersection geometry as the Andover bypass intersects with the Route 14 roadway. And then we have the transition from 5 lanes to 3 lanes immediately to the east of the intersection, which causes queuing for the left turns coming onto bypass, and which therefore backs up the intersection or the roadway. Moving over to Hillside Road. This intersection, as you know, is terribly difficult to make due to the congestion in the area, or pedestrians to want to cross this location from the street, which is unsafe due to the lack of sidewalks and crosswalks in this area. Just real quick, the purpose of this project in simple terms is to improve safety and mobility for all users, including pedestrians, bicyclists, motorists, and transit users. The project proposes to address safety and capacity issues identified by the corridor study and 2 RSAs that were performed. Here's a quick look at the proposed section for the roadway. The project proposes a consistent 5-lane roadway section with a sidewalk and shared use path throughout the 2-mile corridor. There will be, as I mentioned, there are 9 intersections along the corridor, and these will all be signalized by this project. Of note, there will be two new signals. The current Hawk signal at the Merrimack College Royal Crest intersection and the Hillside Road intersection. Signals will all use adaptive traffic signal control, which means that the signals will be talking with each other and will be able to adjust to real-time vehicle demand. Moving on to proposed conditions here. For Waverly Road, this slide shows the full 5-lane section at Waverly and extending eastward past the Eaglewood shops. The design also includes, although it's off the page here, it is a crosswalk at the Walgreens Hawthorne Way intersection. It'll have a RRFB to help for safety. At the Eaglewood Shops signalized intersection, we will be removing the right turn lane, which is unnecessary, and which will also reduce the impacts to the adjacent stone walls and landscaping. And in addition, there's another crosswalk that's added to this intersection. Again, heading back to the Peters and Andover Street intersection, the design addresses capacity issues at the 2 intersections by extending turn lane widths, lengths, I should say. The curb geometry for westbound right turns onto Andover Street is reduced to help slow vehicles down as they turn onto Andover Street. Again, as mentioned at Merrimack College and Royal Crest, we're proposing a full traffic signal at this intersection with crosswalks at all legs. The design at Andover Bypass removes the unconventional jug handle. It tees up the intersection to reduce crossing times for turning vehicles. It adds full crosswalk access throughout the intersection. It tightens the right turn geometry onto Andover Bypass and uses a second lane to address capacity for that need. It provides the 5-lane section east of the project, which will help reduce queuing due to left turn demand. At Hillside Road, the design again extends the 5-lane section and creates a 4-legged signalized intersection with full crosswalks. The Hillside Road southern leg makes a direct connection to the Chestnut Green Office Park and avoids having a cut through along Hillside. A park area is created on the south side with the sidewalk connection for the residents that live on that street. So along this stretch, again, we'll be having a 5-lane section, and it will connect to the existing 5-lane section at Stop and Shop. There is a box culvert that is proposed along Mosquito Brook, which will replace the existing 48-inch pipe. This helps us meet the street crossing standards and to provide crossing opportunities for small animals. And finally, we get to the Stop and Shop Mill Road intersections. Here you see the eastern limits of the project, and additional crosswalks are added at these intersections. So as we all know, there are adjacent developments that are proposed in the area. We just wanted to let everybody know that we are aware of these and continue to coordinate with the developers, Trinity Financial and Crosspoint Associates as needed. So there will be some right-of-way impacts for a project of this nature. It will require fee acquisition and easements. Of note, the project will need to acquire 3 parcels adjacent to the Hillside Road intersection as shown here. So we wanted to just take a minute to clarify the MassDOT right-of-way process. MassDOT only requires right-of-way to support the purpose and need of the project. MassDOT will contact the affected owners and explain the acquisition process to each. MassDOT will appraise each fee taking and easement at fair market value. All acquisitions, permanent and temporary, comply with state and federal laws. As far as other impacts, there are stone walls and landscaping that are being impacted. This is currently being discussed with the planning board to determine mitigation strategies. Also, the project includes impacts to wetlands, which will involve replication and other mitigation efforts. For the project schedule, we have already completed the project development and 25% design phases. Our next steps are to have the design public hearing this spring, summer, and move to the 75% phase. We plan to advertise the project in fall of 2023 and begin construction in spring 2024. With that, I say thank you for your time. We will now take questions you may have.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question?
Please.
Hi, Chuck. Can you go back to the property takings that you were proposing on Hillside? I just didn't get a chance, I didn't have my glass on and could see the actual properties.
Right. So, yep, so there are 3 parcels that are pretty close to the roadway today. And with the widening, it'll be necessary to take the 3 parcels.
Okay. And those are in the eastbound lane, so they're on the,
Correct.
and so that was one of the concerns I wrote down, so I'm glad you're addressing that. Also, the property across the street is also very close. I know that property
Yes.
has, like, its front door almost empties onto 114. Would that be impacted? And then the same question for the properties down on the corner of Waverly and 114. There's a red house down there where all of those properties have, the front doors almost walk right out onto 114. Will they be impacted? In other words, will their frontage be impacted as well? And have there been considerations given to those homeowners?
So, with regard to let's go back to Hillside here. With regard to the house on say the northeast corner, that parcel or couple of parcels there have been acquired by Minco and is scheduled for development. So we had coordinated with them previously, and they are aware of the project and the need for additional fee taking through here.
Okay.
It is believed that they are planning, based upon some concept plans that they prepared, they're looking to do something in these parcels here. So they've already acquired the property.
I see. Okay.
Does that address that question?
It does. Yep. I had seen this sign up there, I didn't realize they'd already acquired it.
Right, yeah, so that'll be up to them. And with regard to the red house on the northeast corner of...
Yeah, and pretty much all of those houses coming up 114 there, eastbound, I guess, well, I guess that would be in the westbound lane, but they're all very close to the stretch of roadway.
That is correct. We actually are providing sidewalks in that area where there are none there today, with the use of a small retaining wall. We should be able to maintain those properties with minor impacts.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
How typical, so 114 right now, if you go closer to Middleton beyond the scope of this project, uses that, I think it technically could be called a third lane or a middle lane where either side could use it to take a turn. This is a pretty dense area, and there are many more reasons in this section of 114 to take left or right turns because of the amount of commercial properties, doctor's offices, retail that are on that road. Can you explain more about the engineering behind how that kind of community lane works? Where I can imagine, already it's really congested, and you have cars zipping into that central lane to take lefts or take rights. I mean, are there examples in the state where there have been stretches of such dense roadway that use that as a I guess decongestion method? And how does that work for drivers? I mean, are there any upticks in accidents? Or, I mean, clearly if it's being proposed, it must work. But can you give us a little bit more background on that?
Are you asking about the center turn lane?
Yeah. So the fifth lane. So I mean,
The
again.
fifth lane, right.
Yep.
Right, yeah, so when you have, let's say, if you had just 4 lanes, whenever anybody needed to make a left-hand turn, they have to stop in the travel lane. So whenever you have that issue, especially when you have a congested area, you have the potential for rear-end collisions and people making hasty decisions to make a turn when they find a gap. Having that center turn lane gives a space for them to pull in and gets them out of the through lane and time to make that decision. What this does also, from studies, have shown that it reduces the likelihood of crashes.
Even in dense, so that again,
Yes.
I'm saying is you're proposing it, so it must be the case. So just my gut reaction looking at it is you're going to have many cars in many different sections zipping in at the same time, going in opposite directions. And so, while you may reduce rear end collisions, I feel like head-on collisions, my gut would say that could spike, and I just didn't know if you could provide greater feedback as we try to communicate to the public why this is the best option.
Sure, yeah, there is a misconception that these center turn lanes are not safe. It's not to say that you could not have a frontal collision. However, you're more likely to have a front face-to-face collision on a non-divided roadway where, you know, a car could veer off to the left and come into the oncoming lane. So this helps alleviate that as well. We found in similar instances that there's a crash reduction factor of, I believe, Joe, I believe it's right around 45% that you could see a reduction in crashes by about that much.
Yeah, Chuck, based on the situation where you go from a 4-lane roadway without the center turn lane, and then you go to a 5-lane roadway where you introduce this center turn lane, there's a reduction in property damage and injury crashes by roughly 44%.
Okay.
So it does help to reduce those rear-end collisions. I do understand your question and concern about potential head-on collisions, and I think it's just important to note that drivers shouldn't be using this center turn lane for like decelerating and traveling, and basically that basically they go into this turn lane when they're approaching their turn, so that they really shouldn't be traveling down this for an extended length to help minimize those potential conflicts.
That 44% reduction statistic's actually really helpful, so thank you.
Sure, no problem.
Mr. Chair.
Town manager.
And I will add,
Probably should
they're
have
also,
started with that.
this group will be going to the planning board next week as well, so you're the dress rehearsal for that. So this comment is from John McGarry. It says, I own the 2.04 acre general business parcel on Route 114 in North Andover with 2 commercial buildings containing nearly 34,000 square feet. 510 Turnpike Street is a 2-story, 19,102 square foot office building. 530 Turnpike Street is a 1-story with a 2nd story at the rear of the building, 14,662 square foot retail building with a total of 127 parking spaces. This property will be seriously negatively impacted by the current proposed intersection change at the Andover bypass, Route 125 and Route 114 Turnpike Street. There are currently 2 separate driveways to these buildings, which have been in use since before I purchased this property in 1986. The current redesign of Route 114 totally eliminates eastbound access to one of these driveways and creates a very dangerous eastbound access to the other one, effectively eliminating safe eastbound access to my properties. The eastbound turn lane access lane has been reduced from 220 feet to 50 feet. This obviously is not a good balance of the access and safety issues. On the contrary, the current plan eliminates access, creates serious safety issues, and negatively impacts the value of my property. These potential dangerous problems could be eliminated by shifting the intersection change to where it was originally planned to be in October 2018, which would then provide direct access to my property and the Royalcrest property, totally eliminating the proposed dangerous cross-traffic turns of Route 114 into my property. This would achieve a true balance of access and safety. And I will add that I did some research, and it does seem that Mass DOT has already been speaking with Mr. McGarry through other public comments and emails back and forth that I found on our website.
So what ends?
It seems like they've just started preliminary discussion, just like this.
I mean, it's a pretty,
Here.
definitely overlooked when they first combed through that, but that comment, yeah, do you folks have any feedback on that? Because now that I'm looking at it, it does look pretty. Good word. Impossible.
So Yeah, we have been in discussions with Mr. McGarry, and we've developed this design that allows for deceleration of a eastbound vehicle into the center turn lane and allows for 50 feet of actual storage for cars to make that turn.
But it reduces, so he inevitably has one in and one out. As today, what does he have? Does he use them both for in and out, or both of the access points? Is that-
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, if I'm looking at it, he's got two curb cuts now, right, to get to 510 and 530 Turnpike Street. And I believe they both service as in and out kind of entryways, right? So they have an in lane and an out lane. So he's got, two fully functional curb cuts there. So what you're suggesting is he would only have like one way in and one way out to both properties? From the
So-
eastbound lane, anyway.
Yeah, for the western entrance, it would be right in, right out. That would be prevented, and lefts out would be prevented. Today, right, yeah, so today on that western, technically could make left turns out. Under the proposed condition, he will still have full access out of the eastern entrance.
Mr. McGarry referenced the 2018 plan as being preferable. I'm not familiar with that layout, though. What does he mean by that?
So when we were still in project development, we had a previous design of this intersection that had the intersection lined up approximately, I don't remember the amount, approximately 100 feet, 150 feet line to the east of where it currently is shown. And what we looked at, that did not allow us, I guess what I'm trying to say is it wasn't the best alignment for the project.
And Chuck, also, just to expand
What?
on that, I believe that configuration also, required coordination with the Royal Crest property, where they would have a shared access. Mr. McGarry, I believe, would have to access the Royal Crest property to get to the intersection configuration.
Correct, Joe. That would require the northern access point to be on the Royal Crest property, and there would be a direct access point from 510 and 530 Turnpike Street through that new entrance that would have been created on the Royal Crest property. So we would have been taking property from the adjacent property owner specifically to provide access for the abutter.
If I'm understanding you, wouldn't that, though, also eliminate concerns about folks turning in and out right after or right before an intersection? Because that is he pointed out he has over 120 parking spaces. A lot of times they are full. I think a gym is still in there. They have a bank, plenty of office space. Like that to me seems like a good answer to Mr. McGarry's concerns, is that you'd now have everybody queuing up at an actual signalized intersection.
Chuck, you might also want to mention that the side entrance off this current configuration that's shown, that would be able to lead to to the proposed signal.
What was that, Larry?
On the
side-
Royal Crest signal, that one there, what we're trying to have happen is have a side entrance from Royal Crest into the 510 Turnpike, which means that they would have full use of the traffic signal.
So you're adding an entrance and an exit for the property?
Right, so right there at 3 o'clock on the circle, you would come in there, and then you would come out over to the signal.
So that combined.
And
So-
then you can go any direction that you want.
Larry, did you say that is possibly part of the plan, or that is part of the plan?
That's part of our plan that we're trying to convey to the developer. The developer has to go through our permit process, so we're gonna be looking for that.
That sounds not terribly written in stone right there. That sounds like maybe kind of sort of we're hoping that somebody who we have no control over kind of sort of agrees. And
Well,
if I was
we're
Mr.
in-
McGarry, I'd be concerned.
Well, we're in discussions, we've been talking periodically with meetings, so, we're looking for this to happen. Our district office is also in favor of it as well.
So, yeah, I'm gonna be honest, Joe, I think that if you go back to your rendering or your new proposed pathway, that looks like a really dangerous, it looks like they end up with one way out of both those buildings, and that's going in the westbound direction, because coming out of that first, the easterly most entrance and exit, it seems like there's not a lot of options there. You're coming out and you've got, cars potentially coming in from the eastbound lane and from the westbound lane. So coming out of that and wanting to go east seems very challenging. And it seems like the only way that they could get out is to go out the other exit and go west, and that may not be the way people want to go. So I think Mr. McGarry has a good point, so I hope you can work this out with him to make it a very agreeable situation, because he's obviously a large property owner and has a very big interest in what goes on there, and I think we should definitely hear him out and work closely with him to make sure that his property is not adversely affected by this project.
Yeah, I mean, the eastbound driveway only has, the westerly driveway rather, I mean, the way the current configuration is right now, there's only 5 parking spots that it can access, and it's right in on the left. And that's based under the current configuration.
Oh, those two parking lots are separated? They're not? Is that what you're saying? That's just not one large parking area?
Right where the pointer is, if you go up right to the left, there's only 5 parking spots that you can enter right there in parking.
Right.
The rest of them are, the arrows say that you can't go, you're basically going down a one-way.
Right, okay.
You can see the arrows.
Okay, but that one really wasn't so much of my concern, it was more of the other one. Coming in and out of that one under the new configuration, the easterly exit. And I guess I didn't realize that they were separated. There are actually 2 different driveways or parking areas.
So the one-way arrows are what cause the flow, but they are all connected. So like if you were in a car,
Right, they're all-
and in the front right there's no median or anything preventing someone. So if they were to pull in, for instance, at the first entrance on the right, they would be able to, if there weren't arrows directing them to go differently, you could drive all the way around those buildings in like a figure 8. So
Yeah, I just hope you work with the property owner, because obviously he's got a pretty big stake in this project, owning those number of buildings there, and, I hope we can come to an agreeable solution.
Well, I agree, I mean, that's why we're really in favor of having it work with the signal that's shown here on this sketch.
Well, like we mentioned, we're at 25% stage, so, there's,
All right. There's work to be
we'll
done.
take whatever feedback, we'll take whatever feedback we get and try to make, the best situation for everybody involved.
You did say that Trinity has to go through you for permitting, correct?
Yes.
a couple of comments, and I concur with my fellow board members. I do think Mr. McGarry has some very serious, reasonable concerns with this configuration. I'm also concerned that all this work being done when we do potentially have another development coming in, it's hard to know if this is going to help or hurt, or what is the actual goal? Is the actual goal to have better traffic flow or to slow down traffic? It's still just an awful lot of moving parts for the average driver to take in, and the people in town, because we only have a few main roads that get us in and get us out, as you, I'm sure, are aware, we're a rectangle. And there's only a few roads that travel right down through the rectangle and very little offshoots. So a lot of traffic is going to be going through here, and with this tremendous potential development coming and all these changes, it's just, as a novice looking in, it just seems like there's an awful lot to contend to or with, and it seems somewhat premature with this other development potentially coming to town. So I guess I'd like you to comment on that, but again, what is the goal here? To make traffic move better along the road, or be able to handle more traffic? I think the people of North Andover are very concerned about traffic tie-ups along this road, and this doesn't make me feel any better, to be quite honest, nor does it Mr. McGarry, and I can understand why. So, could you comment on that, please?
Joe, you want to take this one?
Sure, I'm happy to talk to that. Chuck, could you put on the typical section slide? A big part of the project is including safety and mobility improvements for pedestrians and bicyclists. Right now, this is a very difficult road to ride your bike on, and there are sidewalks missing from many parts of the project, particularly on the north side of Route 114. So you can see with this proposed cross-section, we have a 5-foot sidewalk on the left side that will run the entire length of the project. So almost 2 miles of a continuous sidewalk on the north side, and a 10-foot shared use path on the south side of Route 114, which you can see on the right-hand side. So we'll have a 5-foot grass buffer from the roadway, and then a 10-foot shared use path, which again will run the full 2 miles of the project length, which provides great connectivity. You have a lot of college students along this roadway, which this will provide a great safe space for people to bike, walk in that shared use path. We're also looking to improve traffic operations to the extent that we can. So we are adding a few turn lanes where it's feasible. Chuck, if you could go to the Waverly intersection, the first proposed. So one important thing to note here is off the left side of this driveway, the left side of the sheet. So as you're traveling eastbound on Route 114, you can see that we have 2 travel lanes approaching the signal, and those 2 travel lanes will continue straight through the signal and up the hill heading towards the Eaglewood Shops. So right now there's a single travel lane there, and that gets particularly congested due to the grade of that hill going up towards Eaglewood, especially if you have a truck in that lane. So by providing 2 travel lanes here through the signal, we're going to try to alleviate some of that congestion. If you could go to, I think it's Peters. Okay, so at Peters Street, heading northbound on Peters Street, we're adding an exclusive right turn lane. Chuck, yeah, right there. So if you're heading up Peters Street to take that right, we're adding an exclusive right turn lane. And by adding a right turn lane, we can run that as an overlap while left turns are being processed on Route 114. So we're trying to add lanes where we can. This is obviously a very constrained corridor, so it's difficult. Another travel lane that we're adding is off of Andover Street, so on Route 125 heading down where Chuck's arrow is, we're going to have adding a second left turn lane. So right now there's a left, and then there's a shared left and a through lane. So we're actually adding another lane there so that we'll have two exclusive left turn lanes so that we can process more vehicles during that signal phase as they take that left to head eastbound on Route 114. So again, that's another way that we can help to process more vehicles through an already very constrained location. Chuck also mentioned heading westbound on Route 114 at this location. There used to be a channelized right turn where basically that right turn could be taken at a very high rate of speed and kind of be, you could take that right independent of the signal. And Chuck's going to zoom to that right now. So you can see that you have that right turn that goes around that island there. And when you look at our proposed plan, we're getting rid of that island and we're bringing that right turn in to the signal so that we can make that a lower speed turn. I realize that may not help capacity at that location, but we are trying to improve safety as well because we are adding crosswalks and sidewalk, and we do want to make the area more walkable and bikeable. So we are, trying to balance the needs of vehicles, motorists, pedestrians, and bicyclists. So that will become a more controlled right turn, which will improve safety there, particularly for folks coming out of, I believe that's Highland Ave.
Highland Terrace.
Yeah, that's a really dangerous coming out of there, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So at least, folks going in and out of Highland don't have to deal with that high-speed right turn coming off of 114 westbound. Chuck, if you could go to the
I
next.
do like the sidewalks. I think, we have had 3 fatalities in the last 10 years. In the proposed section, we've had 3 fatalities, one Merrimack College student and 2 other pedestrians closer down to Waverly Road. So I do like the addition of the sidewalks and the expanded crosswalks with, being well lit and well marked. That certainly is going to be helpful and hopefully eliminate the fatalities that we've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. That's certainly the hope. We're going to be using leading pedestrian intervals for many of these crosswalks to help give pedestrians just a short head start on crossing movements. Some of the intersections have exclusive pedestrian phases. It just depends on how much conflicting volume there is out there. So as Chuck mentioned, at this location at Merrimack College, basically the front door, we'll be replacing that hawk signal with the full signal. Chuck, if you could go to Hillside. And Hillside obviously is a huge improvement to install a traffic signal at this location. We feel by introducing the signal, you could actually alleviate maybe some other, cut through traffic that may be going on because now folks will be able to take a left out of Hillside a little bit easier, actually a lot easier. So maybe there could be folks that might be avoiding this intersection because it is so challenging. But this new signal should really go a long way to help alleviate really the safety issues at this location by putting in a fully actuated traffic signal where we can process vehicles out of Hillside safely. We can also process left turns into Hillside more safely off Route 114 eastbound. And of course, we have the crosswalks to provide connectivity for folks that may live on Hillside that want to go for a walk and connect to this new shared use path. And as Chuck mentioned, we have that sidewalk connection that runs down the Chestnut Green axis down into the Buckland Road neighborhood, so there's a nice connection there as well. And to the right of this intersection, as Chuck had mentioned, we're going from a 3-lane section to a 5-lane section, where this, part of 114 is very congested during peak hours, and I think that's due to it's a narrow roadway because there's so many constraints with the properties, some of the houses so close. There's environmental environmental resources that were most likely just avoided in years past, and we've taken a stance that we want to build this project the right way now, and it does have impacts to obviously these 3 houses, as well as environmental impacts which we'll mitigate, but we didn't want to leave a situation that was going to be a problem down the road. So, we have a consistent 5-lane section for this corridor, which we really think is the right long-term solution to hopefully address the concerns. This should go a long way to improve operations, particularly down in this area, which is a line of vehicles during commuting hours at times. So, as was mentioned, these traffic signals will be coordinated with one another. They'll be adaptive, which is kind of the latest and greatest technology, meaning that there's cameras at each location where the traffic signal can see platoons of vehicles, and they want to adapt and respond to real-time traffic demands. So it'll be the latest and greatest technology out there to try to manage traffic to the best ability that we can.
I would just add that the timing-wise, I know is concerning, and they've been working with the 2 developers to try to line that kind of timing up as much as possible so that they wouldn't be doing construction at 2 different periods, which I think is why the 2024 period is prevalent at this point. And just for history, and just correct me if I'm wrong since I was not here, sometime around 2015, the town petitioned the state to get this project on the tip. Anybody? And it's slated for the 2024 construction period, and it's really taking almost all the TIP funding for that period.
Sorry, we're getting some feedback there.
Yeah.
Let's see. Is that better now? Well, the point I was making is that, so there has been a lot of conversations, and even during our traffic study and peer review for the Royal Crest project, this project was taken into account in determining those traffic studies as well. So they have been working closely together, but unfortunately, due to timing with TIP projects, it's sometimes 10 years later that you finally get the project coming to fruition. So.
I just had a couple questions. I remember back when you guys were, Mass DOT was here talking to us about Mass Ave and 125, and it was more of a safety intersection upgrade versus a capacity. And I was just, I guess, going back to Selectman Smedili, have you looked at the capacity currently versus what it will provide? I mean, I like the fact that it's a consistent cross-section throughout the project. I think that that's going to be helpful for people. We're also constrained by the width of it, but I was just curious if you guys have done that capacity study.
Yes, we've looked at the capacity analysis for all the locations along the corridor. And, generally we are improving operations. The trade-off is that at many of these locations, we're introducing pedestrian phases that may not exist today. So when a pedestrian actuates a crossing, there might be some time taken from the signal operation. That's why we're trying to make the crossings concurrent crossings to the extent that we can. But I can say that we have looked at all the operations that we're proposing here relative to the existing configuration. So we look at basically a future year, in our case it's 2040. We look at the 2040 condition with and without the proposed improvements, and then we can kind of compare those. And we have all that information, which we'd be happy to share with you. It's in something called the Functional Design Report.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful to see. And obviously, we understand that you're constrained by the site. But my other question would be, you said the signals will be able to be adaptive, and so do you see that adding signals would slow down the thoroughfare, or?
You mean adding the 2 new signals?
The 2 new signals, would that back up traffic more, or?
Certainly Hillside is not a controlling location because the side street, Hillside is not as busy as some of the others. So your major kind of controlling factors are really the bypass, and then when you get down to Andover Street, because those are the busiest locations. So those tend to control
Okay.
the flow along the corridor.
And then, as far as, do you have any concerns about the MC at Merrimack College, the kids crossing? Do you feel that that's the best solution, putting in the full signal, or is there other options?
I think that's going to work really well. What we need to understand are the volumes coming out of Royal Crest, which at this point, we don't necessarily have a handle on how much volume is coming out of this potential development on Royal Crest. We just want to make sure there's, we have to be cognizant of the potential conflicting vehicles with concurrent pedestrian movements. Worst case is that we would need to implement an exclusive pedestrian phase at this location so that when pedestrians or students are crossing Route 114, that all approaches would have to have a red indication. So that's something we'll continue to look at. We obviously want to make it very safe. It's a very important part of the project. So we'll continue to work, with the college and, stay tuned on Royal Crest and coordinate with them as that moves forward. So that's ongoing, but I completely understand your concern.
Yeah, yeah, 'cause there's a potential of having, 1,000 students crossing. And then my last question, I promise, is who is going to take care of the sidewalks in the winter? I know it's been an ongoing question for a lot of areas in town.
That is a good question. So let's see. I don't know. Chuck or Larry, do you guys have any input on that?
Well, if you're a state roadway, wouldn't it be state responsibility for that?
Well, it's probably something.
You want to get back to us on that one, or it seems like we might have an
Yeah, I mean, I don't, at this time, I don't have an answer for that, but that's a question really for the district probably to answer.
Well, we should definitely have an answer. It's a great question, because if we install all these nice sidewalks, when the snow comes, we need to make sure that they're still usable, because people become used to using them, and then all of a sudden they've got to navigate around them. So we definitely need some type of answer to that.
Yeah, there's some
That's a fair
locations
question.
that have sidewalks now, so what do they do now?
We don't, so the town does not clear them on the state roadways. So I guess people have to navigate around them, around the snow. I mean, it's not like it's in front of people's homes, right? A lot of that stretch of those roadways are not homeowners or even businesses. They're just open stretches of land.
And you end up with people in 114, like around Market Basket, that sort of thing.
It's a good question. I'd like to get an answer to it.
It is a very fair question, and we'll look into that. Get back to the board.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to touch upon a little bit about what Laura was asking, because I was about to ask those questions, and I cannot help but think that it's great for the pedestrians, it's great for the bicyclists, except for one thing. We're going to have several stops on a 5-lane state highway. And how much is that going to slow traffic? And honestly, as I said earlier, this is one of the main roads in and out of North Andover and connecting the North Shore with the Merrimack Valley. It is a heavily traveled road, and if people are being stopped as pedestrians are crossing, I mean, I don't know how many times you plan to have that to be pedestrian or bikes crossing a 5-lane state highway, and how much is that going to impact people? And they're going to start going onto Hillside and other side roads to try to avoid it. I have real concerns. I know we're trying to do a lot with this project and make it user-friendly, but I've got real concerns that maybe it's too much for a very, very busy and dangerous road and not affect the other neighborhoods, because people are going to be doing everything in their power to get off that road and get to work or get home a quicker way. It's going to absolutely impact Hillside in a very detrimental way, and some of the other roads as well. And I hate to be the killjoy, you're trying to work with all that's going on there and what all could potentially be bringing to that very short strip of road. It's a lot, and I'm concerned that it has potential to be a very dangerous area as people are trying to get in and get out of town. So,
I understand your concern. I would say that having safe bicycle and pedestrian accommodations will actually improve value for the adjacent businesses. That will help them. Yes, there will be some impacts to vehicular travel. However, we are doing our best to mitigate that through proper signal control and creative means that way. So, but we also want to make sure there are safe accommodations for bicycles and pedestrians, because there are not none today. And as you mentioned, there's somebody else mentioned here, there's been 3 fatalities in the past 10 years.
Yeah, Chuck, just to add to that, again, the intent with the coordinated signals is that they work together so that we can minimize the number of stops for through traffic along this corridor. So we want to try to, keep people moving through as best we can so that they don't approach one signal and then stop at the next and stop at the next. We want to platoon vehicles through so that their travel time is minimized. The delay associated with pedestrians is just dependent on how much usage these sidewalks and shared use paths, it depends on the usage. Obviously, if the usage isn't high, then those pedestrian phases won't be called. So it just responds to the actual demand that's out there in terms of ped activity. But
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, in terms of the roadway operations, the signal operations, we aren't taking any turn lanes, we aren't reducing storage lengths or reducing throughput. It's at least, status quo or better moving forward. We're looking to improve the operations, and it just depends, like I said, on how much pedestrian activities is generated.
And to further that, Joe, one of the nice things about this project is that we are adding capacity through by the addition of adding a few travel lanes. Like, for instance, the bottleneck at Waverly Road, the corridor between Andover Bypass, Hillside Road, and to Stop and Shop. So that will help the corridor move along a little better as well.
would you be able to give us a range that, say, anybody who's on Mill Road and goes all the way down to Market Basket, how long that will take with intermittent crossings of pedestrians and all the extra signaling? And how long would something like that take? Say, on a normal day, might take, 4 or 5 minutes, or will it now become 15 or more? Or can you do an analysis like that to get back to us at a future time?
I think we could do a travel time analysis.
During rush hour traffic, though, the
Right.
typical, not Sunday morning at 8 o'clock or something.
Right. It'll flow fine.
Yes, it will be great. I think that would be helpful, because
Sure.
I think anyone who sees this and visualizes it and knows human nature and knows young college kids and people's urgency to get to work or pick up the children or get home and make dinner or whatever, it's a lot, that's all I can say. It is a lot. And not knowing what this potential development could do makes it even more uncertain. So anything you could just help most of us wrap our minds around it, those of us who aren't highway engineers, it would really be helpful.
So I just had one follow-up question on the Merrimack College intersection. So that's no longer going to be just solely a pedestrian activated light, correct? It's going to be running in adaptive with the other signals. But will there be any additional signaling to let folks know that that light is changing? Because that intersection is, like, as Selectman Bates said, that could be a very heavily traveled intersection, and I think, you know, if we could have some kind of warning signal, and I think, Joe, you said that there may be a blocking of that, a blocking of those lights on either side of it to prevent traffic. But is there any kind of a signaling that we can have to let people know that that light is coming, or that light is turned red?
So like some type of advance indication that a red light's ahead, is that what you're suggesting?
Sorry, I'm getting on the mute.
I'm just asking if there could be some kind of a warning light, because that intersection will be heavily traveled by students going across 114. If there can be an additional warning light that would, you know, let drivers know that that signal is going to go to red, I guess is my question. You know, just an additional safety measure at that intersection.
Yeah, that's something, you know, typically we'll do advanced warning measures when sight distance is a problem, if there's not a good line of sight of a signal ahead. But in this case, you have pretty good approaching, you know, line of sight where you'll have a traditional indication where you might have the green, and then it would go to yellow and red if you're traveling 114, which is a little bit different than the signal that's out there today. It's a little bit of a non-conventional hawk signal. You know, some folks may not be too used to how that works if they're from out of town or whatnot. But what we'll have is a more traditional signal, and maybe there's some signing that we could put in advance, or you know, we can think about ways to maybe highlight the location and to, you know, provide driver awareness or better driver awareness of what's going ahead.
Flashing pedestrian crossing sign or something, light in advance of it on the eastbound and westbound lane.
That's something we can look into.
This is a good lineup for my question, Mr. Chairman. So if you were to go down to where the intersection of where Bertucci's is, where if you were driving towards Lawrence and to take a right on to Andover Street, that's one of the few spots where it seems like we're not, or at least it would appear that we're not adding roadway, we're taking away from it to help reduce the speed, which I think probably makes sense because we all have driven over there, and it is an area that's really easy to not have to slow down while you take a right. What does that look like for the property owners over there as far as, is that because we're adding sidewalks, are we still going to be taking land from those abutters to add sidewalks?
There will be some partial fee acquisition in that area, meaning we'll have to take a little strip of property here and there.
So, jog my memory. So at the Stevens Estate a couple years ago, there was an initial discussion about what this project could look like, and I know a lot of the property owners from that neighborhood were there asking about what the taking could look like, and the quote was that up to 10 feet could be grabbed. And so for the multifamily that's one immediately up from the intersection, it sits up on a hill, and so if you were to take up to 10 feet, it would be a dramatic jump up then to their front door. And so will, in that instance, like as part of that project, MassDOT going to be adding stairs, adding a retaining wall, if it ends up being that they move in by 7 to 10 feet?
Right. So if we do need to, you know, acquire a little bit of property, say 10 feet, I'm not sure what it is off the top of my head, but if we have to cut in and if there's an access point, sidewalk, stairs, we would, you know, we would tie into that or create stairs. and sort of like what we did here at Waverly, or what we're proposing here. We're building a little retaining wall to minimize the impacts along there. We have to regrade the entrance to the driveway. So yeah, we'll do our best to make everybody whole.
So in the case where folks have like existing retaining walls or existing rock walls or existing fences, we compensate then for them losing that?
Yes, so the general process is either our contractor will, like, say it's a fence, we'll have an item for remove and reset, and they reset it at the property line. If it's a rock wall, depending upon what type of rock wall, they might remove and stack it, and we will reimburse the property owner to have somebody else come in and reset it to their liking.
Okay.
And then they are reimbursed for that. And that's part of the right-of-way acquisition process.
What is this? So that's a good section, and I'm sorry, I'm focusing on it because, like, for instance, my mother-in-law has lived there for 55 years, and so can remember when that was a much narrower roadway. And so obviously the right-of-way continues to move to the left, to the left, to the left, and what used to be a pretty substantial side yard has now become a much more narrower strip of land that connects the front yard to the backyard. And so I'm just curious, what happens, as MassDOT has continued to chip away at those properties, does the right-of-way continue to move in X number of square feet every time they chip away?
Yeah, that's pretty much how it works. And every time they do it, they evaluate, what the property value is and determine, what the fair market value for that property, for that acquisition would be.
Now, so we're now going up 3 properties, so that's on the corner of Berkeley. It's literally the last house on the screen before we're now off on the right. So that house right there, which is a multifamily, I believe, that already has a pretty narrow front yard to begin with. And that doesn't look like a space where we're necessarily adding, unlike that multifamily kind of unit more towards right at that intersection. What does that look like? Is there a way to zoom in even closer? Because I feel like that's an example of where 114 already is pretty close to the front door of that house. I actually don't know if it's the front door. I guess that's probably the side door.
Is it this house or this house?
That house, the one that you're on right now.
Okay. Yeah, I actually, if I'm not mistaken, I think we're actually not coming any closer to this house. I'm not positive, though.
How many?
Even though we're adding 5 feet of grass shoulder and then a sidewalk?
So in this case, it's a 3-foot buffer and a 5-foot sidewalk.
Okay.
But there is we're not necessarily, if I'm not mistaken, outside of the right turn lane here, there is some minor widening here, but I don't believe we're really doing a lot of widening in this location, other than adding a 3-foot buffer.
Okay.
If, you might have said this earlier, how many takings of property are there any takings where you will take the entire property? Well, you did talk about Hillside. Are there
Right,
any?
there are 3 full acquisitions. Those are the 3 that we have identified.
And that's it, okay.
Right, and a gentleman had asked earlier about the northeast corner. Early on, that was identified as a full acquisition. However, we understand that, I believe it was Minco had acquired the property and we're looking to develop that already. So we had coordinated with them and let them know that that house will be impacted by the property. So eventually, they will, whenever they go to develop the property, they will address that.
Mr. Chair, we just received another public comment on this item. Would you like me to read it?
I appreciate it.
Sure. This is from Andrea O'Donnell on Sargent Street regarding the MassDOT 114 project. What are the other types of crosswalk accommodations possible, like overhead walkways similar to what is on 125 at McDonald's / the high school, Seems that would be safest for pedestrian and traffic flow. Thank you.
So, to provide, I believe the question was, have we considered a pedestrian overpass?
Yes.
So, yeah, we've not really, really fully considered that option, just due to the cost and the general feeling that it was an unnecessary cost. Joe, did you know of anything more about that?
Well, just going to say, based on the current usage and crossing patterns, and the amount of traffic we see there at that hawk signal today, it doesn't appear that, a bridge or whatnot may be necessary at this point. If that parcel is redeveloped into something completely different and the usage is much different, that needs to be considered in terms of, what volumes are realistic and that needs to be thought about. But at this point, based on the current pedestrian movements at this location, we feel this is the appropriate control.
Mr. Chairman, can I jump in? So there's a word that you used, current, that leaves me a little bit concerned because, at different points in this conversation, we've talked about how we are anticipating that there could very likely be a substantial development right there. And so you're talking about doing, and I think that overall, I'm glad that this is happening, and I know that this is, we're at the 25% stage, and we're trying to tease out ways that this can be better, and you're soliciting our feedback. But I mean, there's a real possibility that, especially this segment that's on the screen right now, could really drastically change. And so, at least from a design perspective, why wouldn't there be a backup design based on what ends up getting decided for this parcel?
I think the way we typically handle it is, when we start a project, we look at, we get our traffic counts and we look at pedestrian activity and bike activity. And then we look at any projects that have been approved but not yet constructed. So that means there's a project waiting to be built, but it's been approved and it's ready to go. It just had not been built at the time of our data collection. So what we typically do is add in specific, vehicle trips, pedestrian volumes or whatnot to account for those approved projects which were not constructed at the time of the data collection. In this case, there's a project proposed which has not been approved yet. So that's where it gets challenging, because there's been many times where we will try to account for projects along a corridor that are, private development projects, and, we try to account for them, and then things change, it doesn't happen, or, so we're constantly trying to adapt. And so typically we do not account for private development projects unless they've been approved for construction.
And I can see that, like, for instance, you referenced that parcel that Selectman Valencourt had referenced, the one that's been acquired by Minco. But this is one that's a little bit different because there's a heavy discussion about it. And yes, it could pass, it could not. And then, of course, there's also questions about, what happens if it doesn't pass. But hypothetically, like, we're looking at a very real possibility that there could be, and 1,000 students living over there? 1,000. 1,000 beds of students. So those are students that'd be crossing repeatedly multiple times a day. And we as a community already have a high school that not all those students come anywhere close to being users of the overpass on 125. And that portion of 125 is nowhere near as busy as this portion of 114. It just feels like, Ms. O'Donnell, who submitted public comment, I think that she's spot on, that this, I don't know how this couldn't responsibly be part of the conversation, because I think the average resident probably feels the same way that she does, which is they're scratching their head wondering, how can you move forward and not at least talk about this as a real possibility and a real solution to what's likely to be a problem?
The time analysis, is there any way of calculating how that would change if this development that's being proposed came in?
I would say, my opinion is that the developer should be performing those studies. And I'm not, I hope you understand what I'm saying there. It's not that I'm trying to push that off onto someone else, but, it's their project. I think it's important for them. They're familiar with what their site is likely to generate. We have given them our analysis, our proposed analysis. And, personally, I would say I think it's on the developer for them to present how their project is going to impact our project, and then we work together to understand, how can we mitigate it. But, MassDOT can't mitigate increased traffic or pedestrian accommodations that are resulting from a private development. So we just need to be careful, like who's responsible for what. And I guess I hope that makes sense. But we're by all means coordinating with the developer, but it's important for them to understand what their impacts are on our network that we're proposing, and they need to mitigate that to the extent that they can, and that's acceptable to the town.
But in this case, we know that this development will funnel bodies directly across. Like, this is a pretty complex project. You identified, is it 9 intersections? Am I mistaken?
Yeah.
So, this will probably impact all 9 in one way or another. Like, this is one where really, like, this intersection, the way it's presented, gets blown up if this project happens. And it gets blown up by pedestrians, so not vehicle traffic. And because the pedestrians have the right of way, this is the real possibility to do the very clogging that Selectwoman Smedili has brought up.
Exactly, this is a huge concern.
And it's mitigated by an overpass that, I realize a private developer would be causing this, but in fairness, like, isn't this entire project because of what people are privately doing?
Exactly.
Madam Town Manager, we are still waiting for the traffic study from Royal Crest, correct?
Traffic study and the peer review of the traffic study are both available on our website. We create a Royal Crest website, and you can see both of them there. And you can see what they did for the traffic counts as well. Now, typically what would happen in a private development like this is just like what happened with the Amazon project, right? MassDOT required the developer to do certain repairs or improvements for in front of their property, right? And if you remember with the Amazon project, we included that value as part of our development agreement. I anticipate that if the Royal Crest project went forward, you would see something of that nature, where MassDOT would require Royal Crest to do certain improvements in front of the property, which could include improved pedestrian access, and then we would reflect that both in our permit from the planning board as well as in our development agreement.
So my thing is, though, like, why wouldn't we, it just feels weird not to have that be part of the conversation, like almost a slide A and a slide B for this one intersection to prepare for 2 possible scenarios.
This reminds me a lot of the Recplex, and if you think about that light on 125 in front of Beacon Hill Boulevard,
Yep.
right? So the traffic counts right now are not there, right? So we couldn't have the light put in. But when the Recplex goes forward, then the traffic counts will be enough, and they'll put the light in. But MassDOT wouldn't put the light in now because the Recplex was still in litigation and there was no certainty around the matter. And so I think a lot of the time, what happens with MassDOT is it's very formulaic in what they can allow. And so when something is still tentative and not permitted, they usually will not, in my experience, reflect it. And then it will be basically our job to make sure that Royal Crest does what is required by MassDOT in the permit and reflecting that in our agreements with them.
But so we've seen, though, an example of, like, pre-Recplex, this is what's going to be there. Post-Recplex, this will be what's there. Of course, the Recplex may still possibly not happen, but we know what could be there. Exactly, knock on wood. But we know what could be there if it does happen, meaning from a MassDOT perspective. That's basically what I think we're all hoping for is, can we see what could be there if and or when the project at Royal Crest move forward?
So we need to work with the developers of Royal Crest, the college, and MassDOT, like we did originally with that intersection a few years back when we went ahead and put in the hawk lights there to try to get safe passage. There was a collaboration between those 3 organizations. Maybe, as we start talking about Royal Crest, increasing the population of students there to 900, benefiting the college, benefiting Royal Crest, maybe they need to start having the conversation with MassDOT on how to get their students safely across, and maybe they're the ones that need to start thinking about again, collaborating between the three organizations to fund and put that structure up.
I'm not, and of course, I'm not saying that we fund it, but
Not we,
becomes how do
not we.
No, I know, but we're saying like they need to go collaborate, but then why are we spending 90 minutes talking about an intersection when we're not entertaining every possible real scenario right now? And I know we weren't just
Hearing
talking about
about it
this
tonight,
intersection,
so-
but for me, I think that, I'm gonna go back to the comment that was submitted by a live viewer right now. I think that this is something everybody's wondering. If we're already going to be investing time and energy into this corridor, and we know there's this big project coming up, I think it's important, for them as well, so that you as designers aren't spending so much time putting together a design for a corridor that may be essentially blown up by a project 6, 8, 10 months from now. I'd want to see that, and I think people would want to plan. The Hawking is a good example where that was kind of like, let's come up with this idea because it addresses a problem, but I don't know that everybody was really ever happy with that light situation anyways.
It's that flashing red light, okay, do I stop, do I stop? And you don't stop, that means it's free to go, and that's counterintuitive.
It took a long time for us, and we did, for the people just zipping through that aren't regular
Yeah.
drivers, I'm sure they're left confused. For our regular drivers, we had to do a PSA, on how to use an intersection.
Well, the other problem is how to use an overpass. And I was there when we first put the overpass in. I used to walk to school, and we never used the overpass because it was too much of a burden to go up and around and around and around. So we always went right across 125 anyway. But then they put in all the fencing to prevent that from
They
happening.
got you.
Right, because then we had to. So now you're talking about having to do other things too to potentially prevent getting around that. And believe me, the kids will figure out how to get around
They-
it because it's a burden to go, go up and down and around and around. It takes a lot of
It
money.
might, honestly, it might require, like many colleges do, it's minibuses, especially during peak hours, that you just shuttle them back and forth.
But also, that's a good example, because that section of it goes back to the earlier point, of 125 is nowhere near as busy as this section of 114. I went for a walk yesterday. We walk across the street without lights, without any signaling, because you are able to. The traffic it has enough inconsistencies to allow that. I don't think that this section does, especially for the frequency of kids. So, but I do agree. You want to make sure that there aren't kids just kind of skirting it. But
Well, I think we beat this one up pretty good.
I was gonna say, we probably should move on now.
The zoning working group for Royal Crest. I can certainly bring this to that working group and tee that up with them and say, what about possibility of building a different type of crossing? Are there such things as underpasses too? I know I go to a lot of Patriots
Yeah,
games, they've got underpasses.
we have a
under
cow
Route
pass
1.
in town.
Are there,
We really
is there
do. It
something
goes
as an underpass
125,
that is
there really is
available too,
one.
or could be available? Just thinking out of the box. Poor Larry, Larry's stroking his head, it's not a good thing.
It's kind of dangerous at night.
Okay, so I had similar questions with the district office about asking when the developer would be contributing to certain things. And based on the time of our project, if we got out before them, then, and if there was further development after or mitigation required, I was told that all of that's identified for the Section 61 finding process. So there is a process that captures all of that.
All right, so let the person who actually lives in the neighborhood put the final touch on this, if I could. And I would say this, what's really great about sitting with the select board is the questions and the care that you have. I live in the neighborhood, and you've expressed all the things that somebody who's been living in that neighborhood for 25 years feels. What I will tell you, though, is that right now, living in that neighborhood, it's islands. We are all living on islands. We cannot get to places. I have to get in my car
It's true.
to go around the corner to go to Starbucks, because it's a death run to try and get across the street. And that's ridiculous. That is literally, a 9-iron from my front yard. And that's how we all live in that neighborhood. So while I can appreciate that there's concern about people cutting across town and so forth, we live in a neighborhood where people cut across. It ain't gonna get any worse This is going to make it better. But the most important thing to me is that there's an intelligence and an attention now that recognizes that we need to have access and safe access by car, by foot, by bike. We do not have it there, not just for Merrimack students, but people who live in that neighborhood. If you want to walk, if you want to run along that road there, it is as dangerous as you can get with shrapnel flying all over the place. There's just no place to go. It's very confusing, and what I see here is a logic that's coming into it. There's a lot of details that have to be worked out here, but to me, this is a critical thing for us, and I say to you again, we feel like we're living on islands, and then it's a hazardous trip to go anywhere, and you are locking in people. This opens it up, and I think with the proposed development at Royal Crest, remember, that's also commercial over there. It's not just residential. And that's the idea. That's part of the appeal of that whole area, is that you're trying to develop these communities that have commercial access, have recreational access, and so forth. So this whole project really enlivens the whole community there. I'm really excited about it in that sense. A lot of details to work out, and I'm appreciative of everybody's concern here. But it's really the people living in that neighborhood who are the ones that are faced with the problem and the potential here that's being addressed. And so I really appreciate that, and we will stay connected with Trinity, but we really call on you to solve this in a good way. And I will tell you that, yes, we've adapted to the Hawk crossing and so forth, but the number of people, once you start making crosswalks there, once you give people the ability to actually get out your door and walk down to Bertucci's and walk down to those stores there, people are going to be crossing that road, and you need to have safety for them right now. It is not there. And this is good, but I would push you to say you can do better, because we've tolerated an intolerable situation for a generation there. And so time has come to kind of make up for that. And that's a little bit of the challenge I'm putting on the table to you tonight. And I'm hopeful that we'll have the opportunity this spring to kind of bring that together more. So I appreciate that, and thank you for, my cohorts are allowing me to just take a minute here to
Very well
express
said.
that.
Very, very well said.
One other thing, I agree that in the future that the Hawk signal is definitely not going to be enough. The fully actuated traffic signal with a pedestrian phase, it's a much better solution than the Hawk. If further mitigation is required, then that will be determined later. But I do think that the fully actuated traffic signal is much better solution than the existing, especially with the expanding college and the potential of the large development. So also, I don't know, Chuck or Joe, I didn't know if you wanted to elaborate at all on the adaptive signal control, because that's
I think we get the concept of it. I think where we're at this point is, hopefully we've given you enough feedback here. The table is set for our next discussion, spring, summer. We've got some discussions among us, and you do, as we do with Trinity. And let's hope some of this comes into more focus in the coming months. I think that's fair to say for the rest of the board. Town manager, anything else you'd add?
When would we expect to see them again? Like when the 50% design phase, or when?
They'll have a public hearing coming up for
Okay.
the
Correct.
design phase.
And then 50% is like
With
the
planning
fall,
board.
right?
But
Yeah, and they'll be
will they be
planning
coming
board
back
next
to us with a
They'll have
next?
a full public hearing for the public, and that will be in the spring, correct? This spring, so.
Yeah, spring, summer, we're just finishing some of the 25% comments that are coming through.
Okay. Gentlemen, we much appreciated. Thank you for giving us great insight and the first step on this. So we're looking forward to it. Thank you again.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Well, we didn't give Andrew a chance to chip in there, but I think we may
Please
have.
here for the next item.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So,
Anytime.
although, our next item is the PACE acceptance. Andrew, certainly if you want to start off by wrapping up, if there's anything you want to add, please do.
Yeah, that's a tough act to follow, right? I will just keep my comments extremely brief. Obviously, I gave you all a thank you, by the way, Andrew Shapiro, for the record, Director of Community and Economic Development. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You have a cover memo for me regarding this matter. I just wanted to point out a couple of things before I toss it off to a couple of folks who we have here as guests from Mass Development. I wanted to thank Bill Mitchell, who is the town's chief assessor, who's also with us tonight. He helped to sort of vet this program with me and work on sort of identifying the benefits that it could bring to the town, and to work through sort of a public process with me and evaluating it. I really feel like this is another tool we can add to the town's economic development overall toolbox, and also in terms of sustainability. And the reason we have it before you this evening is because the town does have to opt into this program in order to allow for town administrative offices to place betterments and liens on properties that participate in this program, which you'll learn more about in just a moment here. And I also just wanted to quickly note that we had brought this before the Sustainability Committee last month, so they were able to get a preview of what this program is all about. It seemed like they were very excited about it. We received no negative feedback while bringing it before them. And so with that, without further ado, I will hand it over to Wendy O'Malley, who is a vice president with Mass Development and the program manager for the PACE program, and Dan Murray, who is a vice president of investment banking at Mass Development. Wendy, do you have the ability to share your presentation? And if not, I'm happy to do it for you.
Hello. It is not letting me share here on my end, Andrew. You may have to help me out.
Okay. In the interest of time, I will get it teed up. Give me one moment.
That's my fault. That's my fault. I had the microphone turned up. I didn't think I was going to pick up on it.
One additional minute. I didn't want to have to do this, but it looks like I'm going to have to share my whole screen. Can everybody see that?
Yes. They're coming up. They're
Great.
good.
Okay, Wendy, I will push it along at your direction.
Okay, great. You can go right to the next slide. So as Andrew said, very quickly, I'm from Mass Development. We're the state agencies. We're the state finance agency that promotes economic development throughout the Commonwealth through our real estate and financing programs. Next slide, please. We administer the PACE program. We are the program administrator for this new financing mechanism that we're offering to commercial and industrial property owners throughout the Commonwealth, which will allow them to invest in their properties through making improvements through energy efficiency and renewable energy measures, and pay for it through the savings that are identified from those improvements. So allow them to improve their buildings, reduce their energy usage, and repay it through a betterment assessment that is placed on the property. So this allows a property owner to access financing that's different from a direct loan that they would normally access for financing. And if you're not familiar with betterment assessments, these are improvements that are typically funded for public improvement projects. In this structure, we're using third-party financing. We're not using the typical structure where a municipality would be asked to loan the money for this project. Next slide, please. So just to give you context, we are not the first state to roll this out. We are following along with a number of states nationally that have financed now just over $2 billion as of the end of the year for over 2,500 projects. And there are a wide range of properties that this applies to, and you can see on this graph, the Northeast corridor, specifically Massachusetts, we have a large amount of properties in those sectors. Next slide, please. So just locally, Connecticut and Rhode Island have had programs for a number of years now, and they operate on a statewide basis, where the Connecticut Green Bank and Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank offer similar programs such as Mass Development's new CPACE program. Next program, please. So we've had the program open for 6 months now. We're very excited. We've been working with commercial and industrial property owners to advise them about the program requirements that are in our guidelines that are listed on our website. There are a number of requirements for property owners to meet in order for a project to be approved, both on a technical and financial basis. So on the technical basis, the Mass Department of Energy Resources is the entity that actually reviews the project applications and approves them for savings requirements. Next slide, please. So this is for existing buildings only. This is not for new construction. It's for commercial and industrial properties. I won't read the types here, but what I'd like to point out is there is a residential component in terms of being applicable for multifamily 5 units or more. It is a wide-ranging program, and that's really what I want to get across in terms of the applicability for North Andover. Next, please. And so this is just a list of the type of measures. Hopefully you're familiar with the energy improvements on the renewable energy and energy efficiency side. It allows a property owner to hopefully look at a list of comprehensive improvements and not just look at what we refer to as the quicker payback or the quicker return on investment measures. It hopefully allows a property owner to really make an investment in their building by looking at longer term measures that usually take longer to pay back. Next slide, please. So in terms of the program, as Andrew said previously, there is a municipal opt-in requirement. We've had 38 cities and towns already opt into the program now. In terms of the opt-in, it is a vote, and that's why we're here tonight. That has been done. The maximum financing term allowed under the program here is up to 20 years. And so that really gives a property owner an advantage over a direct loan scenario, which usually offers them a shorter term to repay that financing. As I said earlier, the savings must be used to pay for the improvements. So it allows a property owner positive cash flow in terms of funding this. Next slide, please. And the way this is structured, it is financing that's tied to the property and not tied to the borrower. So there are advantages to commercial and industrial property owners when they're looking at this in terms of making investments on their property. Because this is secured by a lien that's placed on the property, it allows a property owner to not tie up the capital or the credit that they normally would be accessing for making these types of improvements on their property with direct loans. This is intended for projects that are above $250,000 and higher in terms of total financing amount. There is no limit to the amount, but it must be paid for from the savings identified. Next project. Next slide, please. So what I just want to make clear here is that the applications come to Mass Development. They don't go to the town. They don't go to the municipality. We review them in conjunction with the Department of Energy Resources. This is really a tool, as Andrew said, another item that you can offer commercial industrial property owners if they're looking to make investments in their buildings or renovate their buildings and allow them to hopefully make more improvements than they would normally consider when putting together that proposal. Next slide, please. And so in terms of the process, we would be asking the municipality, in this case North Andover, to levy an assessment and place a lien on the property, which the owner has voluntarily agreed to for this financing. We have already discussed, as Andrew said, the details with the town, and the structure appears to be applicable to how they would bill and collect betterment assessments. So we're confident that we could implement this here and allow property owners to take advantage of it if the town decided to opt in. Next slide, please. Actually, we can go to the next slide, Andrew. So just in terms of, I think, the communities that have opted in, this gives you a representation. It's statewide in terms of who is already participating. We are having conversations with a number of other municipalities. We have a lot of interest across the state. So hopefully North Andover is going to vote to opt in and join this list and make it the 39th municipality to join the program. Next slide. And this busy graph is really just intended to represent the transaction structure under which a PACE deal would be closing. So this is intended to represent either an action or an agreement that's undertaken in a commercial PACE structure. And what I'd like to point out is that Mass Development is in the middle as the program administrator. So if there is an issue, if there is an item, you come to Mass Development and we would work with whoever the entity is that we would need to discuss that with to resolve it. That's my information. I did go through the slides rather quickly. Hopefully you had time to look at them before the meeting tonight. I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
Mr. O'Malley, what are the pros and cons for the town to opt into this program?
So there is some staff time in terms of setting up the billing and collection of the assessment for the property that would be applying for the financing and using it. Hopefully we've minimized that effort in terms of the process that we've set up and the entities we've engaged to work with each municipality. These are one project at a time that would come to the community, not a multitude of projects that would take a lot of staff time. So it's really hopefully minimal staff effort in terms of setting that up, and I'll let this town speak to that.
So that's I see that as one of the cons. What are the pros for us to be opting in? What are the true, what are the nuggets that we get, or that the town would, other than obviously, promoting clean energy and et cetera. So what else would?
Sure. So in terms of the properties that you have, it would allow your commercial and industrial properties to remain more competitive in terms of the business owners who currently own them and also for future sale. So when people are looking to stay in their properties, they're looking at the utilities, the energy expenses, and we know that in Massachusetts, those costs are very high. So business owners are always looking to save money. And this is a unique way that they can actually fund improvements without incurring any upfront capital, incurring any additional costs, because they would be funding them from the expenses they would have incurred on the building's existing systems. And so that really hopefully allows the building to stay competitive, whether or not that property owner is staying there or someone else is looking to site themselves there.
Selectman, I would just add from the town's perspective, and Bill could speak to this a lot more eloquently than I could, but when you have a project that's say $250,000 or more, and you're putting that value into the building, that means additional assessment that can be applied to the building in terms of future tax dollars that can be raised, property tax rates. So that is attractive in terms of income, and it's also a competitive advantage if we're a municipality that offers this program and there's someone who wants to come in and retrofit a building, and they don't have that ability to do it in another town, a neighboring town, or another municipality in the region, they might choose to relocate to North Andover because of the opportunity to take advantage of the PACE program.
Yeah, and I think also there could be properties such as the Eagles Lagoon or something like that looks at reinvestment into their property, solar panels or HVAC systems, especially for a business that might be struggling in town, to continue to work in town to provide employment to their employees. It gives them an opportunity to reinvest into their property and then offset those costs through this tax program and alleviate other capital to keep putting into their property and their employees. So we see it as a great tool for industrial properties and a lot of our employers here in North Andover.
All three.
Mr. Chair, so I did listen to the presentation to the Sustainability Committee, and they were definitely in favor of this, and it's a good opportunity for existing business owners and buildings. I think it's a great option for us to offer. My only question is, what happens if the property owner defaults on their taxes, and now this is tied to their tax bill. How does that affect the town?
We have a super lien.
So, I can speak to that. The town standing does not change with respect to taxes or whatever is owed to the town. You are still first in tenure and first in terms of the position for collection. Really what happens is PACE comes ahead of a private mortgage holder if consent is granted by that mortgage holder. So we do not affect the town standing or the municipality standing.
Priority.
Other questions?
I'm sorry,
Any other
someone
questions from
asked a question. I'm getting a little interference.
Yeah, we're getting a little feedback on your mics at the moment.
Any other questions from the board? I would just say, I know, Andrew, you brought this up a little while ago. It's to your point, Laura, just really fantastic opportunity to encourage companies to invest or actually get more out of their investment in the properties, more return. And this is, I think, a growing appeal in communities to offer this. We're a green community as is, right? So this is one more, I think, component that ties nicely to it. So I appreciate the effort to bring it in. I'm feeling like this is something we can make a decision on tonight. Is there any reason for us to deliberate further?
So does that mean you're looking for a motion, Mr. Chair?
I would say, my fellow,
And we can have our first in-person vote?
yeah, it's a,
Oh,
it's a long one, pal.
That's why I'm deferring it to Select Person Bates.
Almost had it, you almost had it.
I will move that
All
the
right.
Select Board of the Town of North Andover approve municipality participating in PACE, Massachusetts pursuant to the PACE Act and authorize the town manager to enter into a PACE, Massachusetts municipal assessment and assignment agreement with Mass Development, pursuant to which the municipality will agree to levy PACE betterment assessments and impose PACE betterment assessment liens on benefited properties located in the municipality, in the amounts determined by Mass Development to be sufficient to repay the PACE financing. Assign the PACE betterment assignment liens to Mass Development, which Mass Development may in turn assign to the providers of the PACE financing, each a capital provider, as collateral for such PACE financing, including on the property tax bills for the benefited properties and installment payments necessary to repay the PACE betterment assessments in the amounts and at the times as determined by Mass Development, and then collect and pay over to Mass Development or its designee the PACE betterment assessment installment payments as and when collected, and enforce to the extent required by the agreement, the PACE betterment assessments and liens, the agreement to be substantially in the form presented to this meeting with such changes, modifications, and insertions as the town manager may approve as being in the best interest of the municipality. The treasurer collector of the town or such other town agency as may be designated in the agreement is authorized to levy such PACE betterment assessments and impose the PACE betterment assessment liens on the behalf of the town without further authorization by this legislative body. Notwithstanding any other provisions of law to the contrary, officers and officials of the municipality, including, without limitations, municipal tax assessors and tax collectors, are not personally liable to Mass Development or to any other person for claims of whatever kind or nature under or related to PACE Massachusetts, including, without limitation, claims for or related the uncollected PACE betterment assessments. Other than fulfillment of the obligations specified in the agreement, the municipality has no liability to the owner of the benefited property or to any capital provider related to the municipality's participation in PACE Massachusetts.
Wow. All right. Do we have a second? Thank you. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None? 5-0. We're good to roll. Let's make it happen.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair and members of the Select Board. Really appreciate your time this evening. And I also want to again thank Wendy O'Malley and Dan Murray of Mass Development, as well as Bill Mitchell, the Chief Assessor, for all his help in guiding this process with me.
Thank you. Great. Let's make it happen.
Thank you to the select board. Thank
Take
you,
care.
Andrew.
Good night
Bill.
now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, we are making progress. All right, next, Center Realty Trust Academy Road land transfer to the North Andover Improvement Society. So we've have some documents in the packet relating to this, but we also have two comments on this?
Absolutely. So let me just give you a little background on it first, and
Yeah.
then I'm happy to read our 2 comments. So basically, what we're doing tonight is that the Center Realty Trust owns a piece of property on Academy Road, which the town has a conservation restriction on. And so they're seeking our approval to transfer that property with the conservation restriction in the deed to the North Andover Improvement Society. The Conservation Commission has already voted to recommend approval of this transfer. And we do have 2 public comments. The first one is from North Andover Improvement Society, so they would be the ones that would be receiving the property. As noted in the paperwork in your meeting packet related to the cow field across from the Kittredge Farm on Academy Road, the Center Realty Trust intends to convey this parcel A to the North Andover Improvement Society. We realize that some of you may not be aware of the rich history of the Improvement Society, a 501c3 nonprofit organization which has been active in North Andover since our creation in 1885. Our purpose is the improvement of the physical aspects of the town of North Andover and the preservation of its natural beauties and points of interest. One of our most notable achievements is creating the North Andover Common as we know it today. They then go through several of their recent accomplishments, which include park cleanups, monthly hikes, creating and maintaining trails, boardwalks, trail guides, various events, financial support on projects within North Andover. In 2020, they worked with the North Andover Garden Club on the planting of new trees in Patriots Memorial Park. They collaborate with other North Andover organizations, and most recently, they've been doing a lot of stone wall maintenance and repairs, namely of note at the Stevens Estate, which we're very thankful for. They are confident in our ability to serve as stewards of the cowfield on Academy Road, and the North Andover Improvement Society can provide for the required upkeep and related expenses of the parcel. And then we also had Kathy Stevens from Academy Road, and she says, the land being conveyed from the Center Realty Trust, a subsidiary of the North Andover Historical Society. And then she says, if we have, is the field that surrounds the first burying. Sorry, it's hard to read sometimes in here. The first burying ground. Formerly a part of Kittredge Farm, the field was cow field until 1973. The land is already subject to a permanent conservation restriction, which will continue to be enforceable by the holder of the restriction, the North Andover Conservation Commission. The NAIS is a land conservation organization, whereas the North Andover Historical Society would like to focus on being a history museum. And then she says if we have any other questions, she's watching. And I believe that is everything. So no changes to the restrictions. All the restrictions stay in the deed. The owner is the change.
Mr. Chair, just a quick comment. I can't think of the name of it. Not the Center Realty Trust, the North Andover Improvement Society, which I have been a member of in the past. It's an old organization in town, and their function, as was outlined, is to keep the town looking beautiful and maintaining its character, so forth and so on. They're a wonderful organization. They totally rebuilt Patriots Park, our neighbor, and to the original plan, which was that an Olmsted Park designed by the world-renowned landscape designer who also built some of the mansions in Newport, Rhode Island. They also did the Emerald Necklace, so forth and so on. I believe they also did the park in New York City, but I should have written notes so I'd be better prepared. But great organization. So for them to acquire this, I think, is just only a great thing for the town. And so I would certainly support this this with a motion, but would defer if other people want to make comment.
Say go ahead and make the motion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any comments.
All good.
much shorter than the one before. Move that the Select Board approve the transfer of land on Academy Road from Center Realty Trust to the North Andover Improvement Society.
I'll second.
Thank you. If there's no more discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Here we go.
And thank you
Absolutely.
to all involved. It's a great,
Yeah,
it's a good thing.
That's an easy one, as they say, a
That's an
layup,
easy one.
right?
Yes, it is.
We'll take that. Okay, next is vote on a written determination allowing the police chief and fire chief to participate in collective bargaining. Obviously, this is an important technicality.
Yes, so as you know, we are currently in negotiations with both the fire union and the police union, and it is very important to both Dee and I that the chiefs take part in those negotiations with us. Obviously, neither Dee or I are a fire chief or a police chief, and it is very helpful when we're doing administrative and operational negotiations for us to have both of those professionals in the room with us. However, both the fire chief and police chief's contracts are tied to the salary increases given in those contracts. So they both are in front of you today with a disclosure, and what we're asking is for a written determination that they be allowed to participate in those negotiations. Neither chief is involved in determining COLAs or the amounts of any stipends. That falls solely on myself, Dee, in collaboration with the finance director. So they would not be involved in any of the financial aspects, but having their expertise makes for much more successful negotiations in our experience.
So, which I'm great for, this is a great disclosure because it's very clear, because it would be very upsetting to people to think that they're in negotiations. So what you're saying is they will be totally separate from one another. But I certainly agree with you that the people who would know what needs to be made and changes for the day-to-day operations of both of those organizations is really important that they be there. I mean, the layperson just won't know some of the idiosyncrasies or small changes or regulations that have changed so far and so on. So I think it's a great idea. Reading this disclosure, it's the appointing authorities of these two positions that are supposed to sign it.
Yes.
So we are the appointing authorities of the police and fire chief. So
Yes.
Would you want all of us to sign it, the chair sign it?
I think just the chair could sign. You all would need to vote to make the written determination, but the chair would be the signer.
And also, too, in the comments section, to put that they will not be involved in the negotiations. There's a comment for them or for us after the signature.
Yep, we
So
certainly
basically
can
can
add
add that
whatever you want to the
comment that
comment.
they will not be involved in any of the compensation.
No.
I think that needs to be made very clear.
No discretion at all over the compensation, simply there to advise us on operations.
That sounds good.
Sounds very agreeable.
So,
A great example is Dee or I might agree to something regarding overtime or vacation without realizing that it's completely detrimental to the department because we're not as intimate with the operations as they are. And so, yes, they will not have any say in the funding, but it's important for us to have them there for the operational aspects of it.
But no, how will we ensure that there's no, I know that sounds silly, other than trust, but
Yeah.
we're dealing with a neighboring community that
course.
trusted, and of course is under federal and, you know.
that's what made me think of it.
They don't have, they have no authority over the finances anyway. Dee and I meet with Lynn and come up with the COLA structure as well as any amounts for stipends. So they really would never be involved in the creation of any of those types of proposals or in the negotiations of those types of proposals. Anything that's funding would merely come through us. But if it has to do with like vacation time, sick time, creation of positions, consolidation of positions, et cetera, that's when it's really important to have them in the room.
So will they be present during that section of the discussion, just
They'll
not?
they listen to the whole thing, but they're not there to negotiate, and they're never the lead. So the way that Dee and I handle negotiations is one of us takes lead, everyone else just sits there and listens. We may, in caucus, share questions and have conversation, but only one of us is the talker, and the talker would never be the chief. What would happen is if there was an operational question, then we would look to the chief for an answer, but either D or I would direct the question to the chief. It's never really that type of back and forth conversation. It's very structured in how we handle our negotiations.
Would they be privy and participating in the general strategy discussions that occur internally between the negotiators on the town side?
Not about money, just
But-
operations.
But would be present in the room internally when you were discussing the salary strategy? They would
Salary,
be asked-
salary strategy is just me, Dee, and Lynn.
Okay,
They'll be there when we present it to the union. They'll see it as part of our proposals, but they will not be involved in making any decisions or strategy conversations about salary.
okay.
I don't believe that they've ever been involved in that, if my recollection serves me well, that, as you said, that it's separate.
Yes.
For us too, it's also an efficiency factor,
Yep.
in that if, the union has a question of us that's operations, we then have to write it down, meet with the chief, get their answer, bring it back. If there's something else we don't understand, we have to have another meeting. Having them there, we can just go outside, caucus, come back in, and Melissa and I deliver the message or whatever.
It's also a good relationship builder.
Yes.
We as the select board have, we vote, we have executive sessions with you, and we vote on the final contracts for those bargaining units. As part of the cost of that unit's contract, my recollection is I can't recall during prior presentations, when contracts have been negotiated, whether or not the cost has been laid out for the impact on the department head, so on either of the chiefs. Will that be part of what you provide as well, so that there's a clear understanding about what the salaries for those individuals will be?
It certainly can be.
I will
we've
not
never
be present.
I've
I
never
will be
presented.
I would impress upon my
Yeah.
colleagues that be something that, though it is expected that the town manager would provide it, other communities have those same written safeguards, but don't
Of course.
necessarily always get asked by the
Yeah.
elected body, so.
Yeah, we
I'm
certainly
sure-
can include that. It's part, it's part of the cost. We also could look at, as we begin to negotiate future contracts with department heads, that we don't include language like this. Because it's really not very beneficial, in my opinion. So,
I do agree with you on that.
I appreciate you taking us down that road, Phil. As an
It's not a
observer.
fun road to be down, so you don't want to be down it.
we'll keep it a one-way street.
Yeah. Just looking at it, we're not visiting, right?
Yeah.
Any other questions relating to taking this action? If not, I'll hear a motion to proceed.
Mr. Chair, I move, as the appointing authority official for the police chief and fire chief, fogging up, as required by Mass General Law, Chapter 268A, Section 19, we have reviewed the particular matter and the financial interests identified by the municipal employees and have determined that the financial issue is not so substantial as to be deemed likely to affect the integrity of the services which the municipality may expect from the employees. And I think we need to add something else to it. It will not be a part of financial decisions, that they will be separate. So,
Okay. With that addendum,
I will gladly second that.
thank you. Any other discussion? All good?
I don't know if the timeline works out in this way. Is it possible to, nobody is ever here forever, right? The select board changes, our town manager changes, the chiefs change. Obviously, we're going to be going through the exercise later this year of hiring a new chief, and, your recommendation would be that, new fire chief, excuse me, and the recommendation would be that this type of compensation structure not exist, where it's based off of what the lowest paid or a paid subordinate makes. Well, I guess actually that answers the question, is that's going to be that's the strategy right there, that you will not be, okay, putting that in, okay,
We're moving to a step structure. So, it will be much more regimented.
okay.
Well, can I get one question? Is this for this contract negotiation, and if we were, for the next contract negotiation, we'd have to go through this again, right? Or especially if the chiefs change, but either
Yes.
way, you'd have to go through this again. We'd have to
Yes.
go through this approval process. It's a one-time thing, okay, good.
I will say to your point, it doesn't really feel like it says that.
Every time we start negotiations, we would do this again. So you would
Okay.
see this again, hopefully in 3 years.
no.
We settle it sooner than that, but you would see it again before we started a new negotiation series.
Because it's specific to the chiefs that are in place
Yeah.
today,
Okay,
right?
that's why, all right, right.
They've
right.
signed it.
Okay,
And they actually signed it.
yeah,
Right.
okay, just making sure, well, we're making sure, right? Well, we got our last chance. Okay, all good, good discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0, and we'll execute this tonight. All right, next, request of Gregory Manson to raise the Armenian flag from April 23rd, 2021 through April 30th, 2021. It's nice to have that flag. To have a request for that.
We're pulling the flag policy out again. Go
Yeah,
with that.
there we
Yep.
go. I know, it's been a little while. We're
Yep,
Yeah.
now we know.
Yeah, no, we got the full request in there, all in writing. We're glad people are taking advantage of it. I wish we could have somebody here to speak to it, but we don't. Because there's a history all behind this, of course. So I'll hear a motion to,
On the
Approve.
flag, on the American flag policy, I did speak to you about speaking to our veterans organizations to see how appropriate.
Yep, so the veterans agent did respond. I think I sent it to you. Hold on one second, let me just pull it up. And he said, flag agenda item, March 5th. He said, as long as it is lower than the U.S. flag, that is the protocol. And he also stated that the 100th anniversary is coming up in April of the Armenian genocide, and that he is thinking that's probably why they're asking at this point. But he said the flag does need to fly lower than the U.S. flag.
And where we determined that it would, which pole would it fly on?
At the Common?
Okay. And it's for one day?
No, they requested it from, sorry, they requested it for a week, the 23rd to the 30th.
What did I
which is
read about
a-
the one day? Okay.
Which is
The day-
Friday to Friday. And no holidays fall during that period. Right? Yeah.
Mr. Chair. In the request, it does say that North Andover Town Hall. Is it supposed to be at the, is it at the Common or the Town Hall?
He did request at the town hall. We usually do fly them at the Common. If we'd rather have it at town hall, we certainly could. I think we responded to him and let him know that typically the requests are at the Common.
At the Common.
I just think that's sort of where we've had it, that's sort of the
Yeah.
idea, so
Yeah, I
let's
was
keep
just-
it there.
yeah.
Thank you. That's
I just
good.
want to make sure.
Past years it had, prior to us establishing the policy, I actually think, right, in past years, wasn't it here? I remember having this debate several years ago.
We did not allow it.
We didn't allow it?
We did a proclamation, we didn't
Instead of
allow
flag.
it.
Okay.
Again, out of fear that I've expressed that I think,
Yeah.
I think each group coming in with a different time set and how many days is not a good policy for the town. I think, you know, as we get more and more people that'll put in the requests, how do you choose who gets this amount of time and this one gets that amount of time? I think I think we should really have a set policy of a very limited amount of days to make it available for other groups, or not do it at all. But
You do have the discretion to limit the number of days or to deny any requests in the policy, just so you know.
Well, this does tie in though nicely to the point, the 24th being the commemorating the massacre. And so it seems appropriate week to recognize this. So, but it will be on the Common, that's where we'll have with it. Okay, good. All right. We don't have anything in licensing? Oh, I thought, did we do that?
We approve the request to fly the Armenian flag for the dates presented.
Great. Second?
On the Common, right?
On the Common.
On the Common, I'm sorry.
And I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I am a yes vote, but again, I still will strongly express my reservations that we should have a set policy for all organizations so that it does not come across as an unfairness to one group over another. I think it's a dangerous road to go down, and
You need a policy in addition to the existing policy that we have. something-
yeah, I really firmly believe that we should have a certain amount of time so that one doesn't get a month, and one gets a day, one gets a week, and as the board changes, that could change from board to board.
But the policy in place, it restricts the timing, it restricts the amount of time.
Well, some can be a lot longer than others. It's not a set day for, or a set amount of time for each group. I'm
But
just
it's-
making a point.
Oh, I know, but I'm just want to make sure I understand. The policy that we have in place today restricts the amount of time, right?
He says the guest flags are allowed to be flown underneath the town North Andover flag and will generally be flown for up to 30 days.
Up to 30 days. And they're opting to go less than that in this case. So we,
How many have we had? How many folks have made requests since we brought this policy out last July? June, I'm sorry. So this is the second or the third since then?
I believe it's a second.
So we'll keep an eye on it, but it seems to me they're not knocking down the door right now. That would be great.
but you're suggesting a more restrictive policy.
The same treatment for each organization. That's what I'm suggesting, equal treatment.
Okay.
But the vote has been taken, it's moved forward. I just want that to clearly be in the record, that we should have the same number of days per organization, and not to be done on our patriotic holidays. I think we did agree to that.
Yep, that's in the
Right.
policy.
But
Yeah.
they could have done 30 days if they wanted to, but they didn't want to.
There's only so many months in a year, so if this thing does get to something where, like, for example, we've got St. Patrick's Day coming, somebody could have said, gee, I'd like that up for the month of March. I don't want to go there because we already did that, but I still think it's in the board's best interest to treat all organizations equally and fairly, and not be picking and choosing how many days, but, okay.
Governmental reports.
Sure, just a quick COVID-19
COVID
update.
update.
Brian is on vacation today, so that's in my boat. Here we go. Okay, so we've had a total of 2,552 cases as of today. We have recovered 2,417. There's 48 active cases. 4 of those are from Merrimack, and we have 87 deaths. Over the last 2-week period analyzed, the town had 94 cases with an average daily incident rate per 100,000 population of 22.2 and a 0.89% positivity rate. So we were pretty excited to see that under 1%. This was, though, higher than the analysis of the week before. We are currently in step 2 of phase 3, with step 1 of phase 4 anticipated to be starting on March 22nd. So indoor performance venues are now at 50% capacity. Indoor recreational activities that have a greater potential for contact are reopened at 50% capacity. The capacity limits across all the other sectors, such as offices, stores, et cetera, are now at 50%. And restaurants no longer have a % capacity limit and will be permitted to host musical performances. And phase 1, step 4, will be a 12% capacity limit for indoor and outdoor stadiums, arenas, and ballparks. Also, in phase 1, step 4, on March 22nd, the gathering limits for event venues in public settings will increase to 100 people indoors and 150 people outdoors. The outdoor gatherings at private residences and in private backyards will remain at 25 people, with indoor house gatherings remaining at 10 people. Additionally, dance floors will be open at weddings. So that's exciting. I just wanted to update you that in our most recent round of business grants, we were able to give 105 businesses approximately $132,000 in grants. That included 4 auto repair service businesses, 14 restaurants with alcohol licenses, including the VFW Club, 15 restaurants with no alcohol licenses, 9 retail establishments, 9 gyms, fitness, dance, or yoga studios, 32 hair, nail salons, and barbershops, 4 dog grooming, pet care, 5 massage, physical therapy, acupuncture, 2 art, music, education, and 11 that fell into the other category. This was on top of the $300,000 that was given to 142 businesses last spring, for a total of $432,000 in direct assistance to North Andover businesses from the town. We continue to assist residents in making their vaccine appointments, and tomorrow, actually, we are vaccinating homebound seniors. So,
Awesome.
lots going on.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So it's probably an unfair question, but it appears that there's going to be some relief money coming from the feds, and I know it's got to kind of trickle through And I also know some of the commitments that you were making in the budget to try and accommodate the schools. Do you have any kind of early thoughts about how you might apply the possibility?
So
I guess?
the rumor is that North Andover may be eligible for up to $3 million. However, we have not yet seen what those buckets look like. So what we've been told is that money may come in 3 separate buckets. There'll be an education bucket, an unrestricted bucket, and then a third bucket that really has not been quantified yet. It's interesting, there is a kind of a population break where, you know, you get kind of that smaller amount of money around the $3 million number, and then there's communities that have more than 50,000 people who are getting, 10 times that. So it's interesting to see how it's breaking out, but we have not really gotten any confirmation on what that looks like. So right now, it's really more conjecture and rumors than anything else.
I appreciate that. I mean, we've already structured a budget not
Yes.
anticipating this, so anything further helps us just move quicker on a recovery or to reach more.
Sure, and the other thing that when we created this budget for fiscal year '22 that we really talked about a lot was the remote academy. And we know that there's not going to be a hybrid option, and we know there likely will not be a remote academy either next year, that if that may not be an option, it will have to be state-run instead, or whatever they decide to do. So, the funding that we had appropriated for that will also be able to be used for bridging the education gap and some of the other goals that we're trying to accomplish to get people back to school. So things are changing really quickly, and we're all just pivoting to try to respond to that the best that we can.
Okay, great. I mean, that's a good thing.
Right? There's hope. Right, we're all feeling hopeful right now.
COVID numbers down and vaccinations, and
Yeah.
it's starting to, like, spring is coming.
Spring is coming. Yeah, that's right.
When those tulips pop out at the end of the week, that's when we'll really feel it, but we're getting there. slowly but
Crocuses.
surely.
Good. So what do we have to get down to get ourselves into the green? What's our target number,
So,
do you think? See if we can challenge the community to get ourselves.
because we have the number of people that we have, I was actually just looking at this earlier today. Let me see if I can pull it up quickly. It doesn't go by our percent positivity rate, it goes only by our number per 100,000. Let's see if I can pull the actual number, sorry. When they changed, it was much easier to calculate before they changed it, but, so for our population, because we have more than 10,000 people and in less than 50,000 people, you have to have less than 10 average cases per 100,000 and more than 10 cases. So what our goal is to try to get to that less than 10 average cases per 100,000. So if you think about it, last week we had 22. So we need to cut our cases pretty much in half.
So you got to get under 30,
Yeah,
basically, is our as an average.
yes, for the 2 weeks period.
Okay, so,
Yep. So we're getting there. Today, I think was the first time that there was more people who had received their first vaccination than had had COVID. And so, you're kind of seeing that scale
Yeah.
turn a little bit there.
good.
But, people need to be patient, keep doing the right thing, and you're right, the good weather's coming, we could open the windows soon, and that will make it a lot easier.
Having said all of that, though, we're seeing hope, and we're seeing, it's still in the distance, the end. Please don't let your guard down thinking, oh, things are better. It's not there yet, so people still need to wear their masks, be careful. Just because there's more, vaccines doesn't mean you still can get it.
Right.
You still can get it, and we must not forget that. We'll be there soon.
We will.
But we're almost there, so let nobody take any chances. That's
It's true.
the most important thing.
Thank you.
No problem.
All right, we just have 2 items on the consent agenda. One is sign the warrant for the March 30th, 2020 town election. Geez, just seems like we just had one. Yeah, we sort of.
It was in June,
Yeah, and accept a grant in the amount of $3,040.62 from MIIA. I don't know if there's anything more that we would need. We don't have to take any direct action on these, I believe. Just need a motion to accept the grant, right?
Both. You're
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we accept the items listed on the consent.
Thank you.
Second.
Appreciate it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None? It passes 5-0. Thank you. All good. All right, now we have the approval of minutes of our February 22nd meeting this year. Everybody read them? Everybody good with them?
Mr. Chair, I'll move that the select board approve the open session minutes of February 22nd, 2021 as written.
Thank you. All right. No other comments or adjustments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That's 5-0. Okay, all set. So, on to old business, following up the hourly wage for Board of Registers that we chatted our last meeting.
So we did our due diligence on that. We determined that the hourly wage for the election wardens is $20 an hour. So what we are recommending is that we pay the Board of Registrars $20 an hour for election-related work. So obviously not for their regularly scheduled meetings, which don't happen every month, but happen when they have them. But when they come to an election, when they do voter registration, when they come in to do that type of work, we would pay them hourly. It may end up being, we were talking about this, it may end up actually being more than what their stipend is now, but it would be a fair compensation for the work that they do.
It's consistent with what they're doing.
Yes.
Yeah, and how much time they're spending.
So how will that be triggered? Is that like, you work 4 hours of overtime, you get paid for 4 hours of overtime even if you only work an hour?
No,
or
we would
is
pay
that-
them just hourly for the hours that they work.
Okay, so if they
If they
come
came in for an hour and did, signed the voter registrations or whatever, then that would be the hour they would work, if opened envelope.
1 hour units.
1 hour,
If they
yes,
paid an
yes.
hour and 15 minutes, they'd get paid 2
Yeah,
hours.
no 6-minute increments here.
Right, they get
We go to
paid
the
for
hour,
2
yes.
Okay.
So, yeah, it'd be 1 hour, yep.
Okay, that's good.
Any issues? Did I get that right? Okay.
That seems very fair and reasonable.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes they can't come, but on the flip side, they have to take a day out of work too, so but they should be there if we're going to pay them, obviously.
Right, then we're compensating them for the 4 elections, which is good, right? So,
Yeah.
All right,
And it could always be adjusted if it's not working correctly,
Absolutely.
or if they're putting in more out of necessity or whatever, but
Absolutely.
than what we think they should, but.
Madam Town Manager, you've got a couple
Okay.
little follow-ups for us here? Oh, motion, oh my goodness.
Chair, I'll move the select board eliminate the stipend for the Board of registrars and pay the registrars a wage of $20 per hour beginning in fiscal year 2022.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you. Thank you, Dick, for catching up on that.
we're all getting tired.
Okay, now, Town Manager's report.
Great.
Mr. Chair, being
Yes.
that I am up for election this year, I'm going to recuse myself from this discussion on the in-person voting.
All right, thank you.
So I'll be right outside that door there.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as you know, we are coming quickly up to our March election, and there was a vote of the legislature in the Acts of 2020, Chapter 255, that would allow us to do early voting. We are recommending not doing early voting this year for a few reasons. Having early voting is expensive, and unfortunately, the state is not reimbursing it this year. We also already have 3,000 requests for ballots. And so we think that most people are going to end up using mail-in voting rather than coming in. We want to make sure that we're protecting the staff, so not having people come in multiple days really eliminates that risk of COVID-19. We don't have the option of using the senior center because we're using that still for the food distribution, although we're trying to move it back into being a senior center soon, so we're hopeful for that too. And obviously the middle school is problematic too because they're back in school now. So we also were able to get our hands on a survey of Massachusetts town clerks, and it did indicate that none of them are planning on conducting the in-person early voting because of the reasons that we said. So I think that the mail-in voting is really what we're going to see this year, and we may see a higher turnout than we typically see for our March election, which would be great. 3,000 is a lot.
No excuse, or rather COVID is the excuse if they need an
Yes.
excuse, right? So
Right, so you're able to, for the first time ever, pull basically an absentee ballot without
treat it as
having,
mail-in voting.
Yeah.
having to have one of those reasons. So due to that, we just wanted to let you know that we are not going to move forward with early in-person voting.
Okay.
No, I think that makes sense. I think it's fair, and as a community, we very much endorsed absentee. Obviously, folks know how to do that and responded pretty well, so I'm feeling comfortable with that.
I hope we keep doing it. I hope it's one of the silver linings of COVID-19 that people are able to more cooperate and be part of our
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
So.
And Madam Town Manager, just so people know, they return their ballots out back, right?
Yes, our box is back out there. I saw them bringing it out the other day, and our box is back out there. You can put your ballot right in the box outside, or
It's
your request.
behind Town Hall by the senior center, so you'd have to drive past,
You can drive
again,
right up to
behind
it.
to Town Hall, not have to
Yeah.
even leave your vehicle, right?
Right in the parking lot, you could drive right up to it.
Sounds
Yeah.
like a Sarah Brush post.
Yep.
No, where's the?
we had all kinds of arrows last time, and I'm sure those arrows will be back up
Good.
again soon.
Great.
But it's nice to have. So
Cool. Sounds
Thank you.
good.
thank you, Dee, for inviting him back in. All right. So the next item I did want to update you on was the Stevens Estate RFP.
Yes.
So we bids were due on last Monday, and we only received one bid that could be evaluated. Unfortunately, a second bid was received late and had to be rejected due to that. We did get a verbal opinion from the Inspector General, as well as a written opinion from KP Law that we were required to reject the bid. And I know that might seem silly to some people, but it's a really important safeguard against fraud. So if you think about it, when bids come in at a certain time, so in this instance, they were due at 11 a.m., Laurie and I, the procurement officer and the purchasing agent, open those bids immediately to see what's inside, right? That's what we're supposed to do. We sit there at 11 o'clock. Sometimes we have an audience when the building's open, and we open them up and we see what's inside. And what they're trying to avoid is the purchasing agent or observer opening it. Let's say we had a trash contract and saying, oh, the trash contract is $19 per load, and then running out and calling the company that they work for and saying it was $19 per load, come in at $18.50, and then they walk in and say, we were late and here's our lower bid, right? So it's having this late bid rejection is really a protection against fraud. And so while I know it can be really frustrating in situations like this, it's really important in the process.
So you open them at 11.
Yep.
That doesn't mean that they have to be handed in at 11 on the dot. It means they could have been handed in the day before, the week before.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
So the one bid that we did receive is from Fireside Catering, which is the Weber Restaurant Group. I can't talk a lot about the details of the proposal because we are still evaluating them, and the evaluation committee is actually doing their interviews tomorrow. What I can tell you is that they own the Gibbet Hill Farm in Groton, and they're also affiliated with the Bradley Estate and the Crane Estate. Unable to talk about the details of their proposal other than to say that it is a management contract. But after they finish their evaluations tomorrow, they'll report to me, and then I will report back to you. I do want to remind everybody that if we determine that we're not satisfied with this proposal, we do have the right to not move forward, and we could always re-advertise. Another thing that's really important about this bidding process is that because we asked for a plan, it's like the one time you're actually able to negotiate with the proposer, right? So if there's certain aspects of the proposal that we don't like, or certain aspects of the proposal that we want them to change, we're actually able to, within this process, have that conversation with the proposer, which is different from many other ways of doing this. Now, the conundrum that we run up to is that the warrant closes on March 22nd. So I guess my question is, obviously, this is a management contract that they're bringing forward, which would not require town meeting approval. But do we want to have a short special meeting after the evaluation committee has made their recommendation, just so we can have an additional conversation before the warrant closes about where we are?
Yeah, I think given the significance of it, I think we're all of us.
Okay,
So I feel like I drag you in one more time.
sorry.
Okay.
Good.
But I do have
Good.
so can you explain what reject? I mean, can you just reject it? Do you have to give a reason, or?
No, we have the right in our bid documents to say that we do not accept any of the bids, or that none of them are advantageous, or that none of them are in the best interest of the community. And
Do you have to provide anything beyond that as an explanation?
no, I mean, the one thing we really want to avoid is a bid protest, right? And in sales and goods, services and goods, a bid protest is actually in court. You don't go to the Inspector General like you would for a construction contract. So we want to make sure that we have a really due process, right? And that we go through this entire process and determine whether or not this bid is advantageous or not. Once they report back, then I can reject the bids if I so see fit.
And can they protest at that point?
they can always bring a case, right? But if you've done your due diligence and made sure that you evaluated fairly and had a really objective process, right? So that's why it's really important for us to make sure we go through the process correctly. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
It's exciting either way. So that's where we are. So we'll go ahead and call a meeting for next week at some point, if that works for all of you. Okay. Laurie and I can circulate some times. The next thing I just wanted to update you on was Royal Crest. And I was going to show you the website, but we have a new website. It's about Royal Crest. It has literally everything you could want to know about Royal Crest. So you guys can see the traffic study and the peer review, initial stormwater, initial utilities, everything that's been done, including a tape of all of the meetings.
Yes.
So you can link right to every single meeting that we've had about Royal Crest so far. One thing that I really want to remind people, because it's a funny and different process than what we've ever done before, there's no application right now, right? So it's very different from what we're used to. We're used to an application, and the application triggers all of these different public meetings, et cetera. Right now, we're really having conversations, and so we're still very much going through this due diligence process. Right now, we are still working on the school capacity study and the fiscal impact report and the peer review of that. And I know it feels like it's taking a really long time, but it's because it's really multifaceted, and we're going to be using this tool to negotiate any potential development agreement. So I want to make sure that we're contemplating every angle and that we have a full understanding of the impacts and benefits. And that means that I keep going back with more questions and kind of picking at different things in order to make sure that we're getting what we need. It doesn't often happen that we have a development agreement come up, right? And so we really want to make sure we're thinking about everything. The town staff is working with members of the planning board and this board to develop a master plan mixed-use zoning overlay district. They are in draft form right now and going back and forth on that. I want to really remind people that will need the approval of a future town meeting, right? So it's not like this project's gonna get through the planning board process and then all of a sudden be being built. We're still gonna have a town meeting about this. So there's a lot that needs to come before the Royal Crest project comes to fruition in any form. Again, the current topics that are being discussed at the planning board right now are buffering and building heights, open space, scale, traffic, utilities, and stormwater. The next meeting about Royal Crest, for people who are interested, that's town run, is March 15th. And they're going to be going before the Master Plan Implementation Committee so that they can hear about the project as well. And they have already been through the Affordable Housing Trust, so you both have seen them too. They will be back before this board after the fiscal impact review is completed to present that. The other thing that we're starting to talk about is actually a town hall type like we did with Amazon Project. This one would be subject specific. So there's a lot of moving pieces. There's also a lot of things that we don't have answers to yet because it's moving pieces, right? We don't know what the zoning is going to look like, so we don't know what the full project's going to look like. But what we want to do is start having, and we've been talking to Brian about this a lot, having these town halls that would be subject specific. So we have information right now about building heights, right? So we could have a small town hall that's specific to that. And then we could have one about stormwater. We could have one about traffic because we have answers for those questions right now. And then at the end, we could have one big one where we could just get full input. But I think it would be helpful, and some of the feedback that I'm getting is it would be helpful to have that back and forth with residents right now. And you know what, it'll be nice out soon and we'll be able to do that outside. But we have to work within the constraints of where we are. So that's where the project is right now. They're looking forward to coming back before you to talk about the fiscal impact. I'm looking forward to that too, and I anticipate that will be soon.
If I could just add to that. So I'm on that working group, and I've brought to them the concerns of people that I've heard from, as you said, building heights, traffic, school impacts on schools, and they've been receptive to listening to it. And we've also, we go through the zoning articles piece by piece, and we discuss each article and each piece of that. And the North Andover team, that Jean and Andrew are doing a fantastic, and Suzanne are doing a fantastic job, just ushering through this process. And it's very tedious, but we're getting there. We're getting through it. And as the town manager said, we're doing our due diligence, listening to the community, listening to the developers, and really trying to, understand the project that they're proposing and working with them. So.
I think that makes That worked for the master plan. You know, we did it all in one, did it in one room, but looking at each of those components solely, I think is really important, gets focused feedback. So, yeah, go ahead, please.
We're a long way off, I
Yeah.
think,
Right.
There's a lot of work to be done. There's still a lot of things that need to be understood.
I think that's important, but having the website out there, I think, is critical, because the velocity of misinformation has really been frightening sometimes, and you're trying to drive people back to something that has integrity, and you can peel into the layers. So I
Right
appreciate.
on our homepage. You can go right
And-
to our homepage and click on it.
And having the meetings, which is the other thing that I would say to folks is, the planning meeting, all those boards, here's the discussion that, your neighbors are involved with in making this evaluation. So, yeah, that's a great addition.
It's a large project, and it's a lot of information, and I know that, going to the website, that's great that we're having the conversations, and I think what is appealing about Roller Crest is that it's already developed land, right? Like, we're not taking open space and developing it, right, from the ground up, and taking away the green space or taking away the fields, and I think that's an important piece to it, and us working with Trinity and making sure that it's good for us, it's good for them, it's good for Merrimack is, really important. And I know that there's real concern about the development in town. But it is still private property. And I suppose my question to you is, where do we land as far, we don't really have control, I guess. We have control in keeping it to be good for us as a town, but it is still private property, right? And there is a piece that we don't meet the affordable housing, so that the contract, the development they can build 40B without really our approvals. So I think it's important that we work with them to make sure that it's something that is good for everybody.
So one of the things that I think is really important about this project and about development generally is when we find a spot that is ripe to be developed or redeveloped, right? So it's redevelopment in this instance, really, more than anything. It's always best for the town to be actively involved in that, because if not, we may end up with just a burden, right? And it helps a lot that we have the master plan that we have, because our master plan really lays out our vision for 114 and for the site. And since we are working and developing a kind of a partnership, and because we're working on the zoning for that area, it gives us control that we wouldn't otherwise have, right? And that's really important. But one thing that we don't control is we don't control affordable housing, right? Because we're under 10%, which means that if we're not really careful about how we plan, and if we don't pick sites where we think are best, right, that will be least impactful to the community for traffic, then we could have predatory 40Bs in other places. So, we do control as much as we can development through zoning, but there are some things that can be built by right. And right now, that is zoned as Residence District 5, right? So there are some things that are allowed currently under that site. A 40B could go forward without town approval, right? It just has to go for the comprehensive permit process in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals. And technically, the Merrimack dorms could be built without zoning approval as well. So, I think that's an important point to make, right? Is that by working collaboratively with developers, we are able to influence in some ways what new development looks like, so that it falls into the frameworks of what the town wants to see for development.
And if we don't work with the zoning and change the zoning, we may lose those retail spaces and market rate townhomes, that type of thing.
I think one of the really important things is that with every project, particularly with the multi-use project, you end up with a benefit and with some aspects of that project that are beneficial, right, to the tax base. When you have residential growth, right, one of the things that is, it's great to have residential growth. And remember, we're a housing choice community, right? So that means that we're in favor of seeing controlled and smart residential growth. but it doesn't have the same tax base as the commercial growth does, right? Because even if you're building 250 units or 177 units, it's still taxed at the residential tax rate, right? Which is unfortunate. But when you have something like an office space or a retail or a hotel, that's taxed at the commercial rate. And so we end up seeing more of a benefit and less of an impact due to those type of developments.
Thank you.
So you're saying, or the upshot of it is that by saying they wouldn't have, if, we don't have any control if somebody just follows the rules as they are now. We can't say no. It's,
If they opt to go to a 40B.
if they have to go to 40B.
Right.
So what we have, so any stopping of progress does not impact the 40B choice, kind of, but it's part A. Part B is if we want to balance, try to strike more of a balance with the retail, residential with commercial, you need to attract commercial development to a degree, right? And that's part of what we're talking about here is
So my
drawing
experience,
that in,
yes.
right?
If you have a large multi-family complex of this nature, it is very beneficial to also have a commercial aspect to it, because the commercial aspect tends to have less of a burden on the community and bring forward more tax revenue, right? So it really will offset the residential side. I think quite plainly, the answer to the question is that anything like that could be considered to stop development, like a housing moratorium or any tool like that, would not be effective in stopping a 40B development. So you cannot pass a multi-family housing moratorium and expect that that's going to stop a 40B development in town, because that's not how it works. As long as we're under 10%, which we are, yes.
I think the loudest thing I'm hearing is that the very things that people are frustrated by with this project are the very things that there are tools outside of our arsenal that other people can use to push forward regardless of our opinions. And that's, I think sometimes that's lost. I do think that it is good that we have this website up. I think we heard this evening from, the MassDOT project, which is, in theory, we'd like to think is happening hand in glove. It's definitely disappointing. I think when there's lack of communication, I think, public trust is always very fragile about something like this. I don't know. My phone's buzzing. People who own homes on 114 found out from Facebook tonight that their homes could be taken as part of that MassDOT project. They didn't know before tonight's meeting, when we had this discussion, that their homes were being considered for taking. So, we had that discussion. We never thought of asking, is that something that you've discussed with the homeowners? I think that there's always this healthy, assumption.
That had been.
Right.
You're coming to a public meeting, you would think that you would have spoken with the homeowners whose properties you're going to take.
And we didn't
that's.
ask the question, we just kind of assumed it was.
Did you talk to the homeowner?
Worse than that your whole front yard is going to go, but you're going to get to stay. That's a little.
I think there's at least one family right now that's probably arguing that the worst thing is that they just found out that their home could be taken, and they've not been consulted, they've not been spoken to, there's been no notification. Now, that's not our project, that's not on you, that's not on us. I think that's what's important, that the select board didn't design that plan, our DPW isn't designing that plan, but it is a good reminder that, this project is happening at the same time another major project is happening, and both are having a pretty monumental effect on that corridor. And regardless of what happens with Royal Crest, the MassDOT project is going forward in some way or another. And so I think it's going to be, it's a lot of pressure on the town to communicate clearly. And we do a really good job of that, but we all know that we get those emails a lot, and it's great to be able to reference and say, no, this was sent out. But I think that having those folks, and there will not be people who are happy regardless, but having those people be part of the conversation is so important, because that's wrong. I'm just, we had this meeting tonight as a select board, having conversations with MassDOT for 90 minutes, and they're presenting this as a 25% plan, but they're talking about people's lives, and this isn't about losing, strips of land for sidewalks. We're talking about literally people's homes being taken. and it was treated just way too casually. And honestly, I mean, I guess by us, but because the assumption was that this is a conversation that's ongoing with the butters because it's been happening for several years. And it's not been something that was communicated. So I think that's pretty gross. So I don't know what the next step is as a select board regarding that specifically. And I know that's a little separate from Royal Crest, but obviously as we discuss the future of that corridor, I mean, it's a complex discussion. And I was on one of the calls a few weeks ago where emotions definitely captured some of the attendees. But there were some real concerns that continue to get brought up, a lot of real concerns that I don't know how to corral that, but it's certainly beyond a lot of the projects that we've talked about in the past.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, so on that part of it, I will reach out to the district lead tomorrow to explain that that's unacceptable and unfortunate. But as far as Royal Crest goes, I think one of the really hard parts about this project generally is that we have this kind of chicken and egg, horse and carriage issue, right? Where we don't have a permit in front of us. We don't have all of the information. We're not having public hearings because there is no permit in front of us, right? And we're also constrained by COVID. So all of those things, the totality of all of that makes this different from anything we've ever done before. And I think that's why there needs to be a real effort around education. And when you educate people, it doesn't mean they're going to agree with you, right? But at least this will allow us, by going through this kind of really comprehensive fiscal analysis and then starting this town hall process, it allows us to have conversations. And at the end of the day, if we don't agree, we don't agree, but we also learn, right, from residents when they bring concerns to us too. And it makes us change things, or we may put things in the development agreement to mitigate concerns they have that we never would have known of, right? So these conversations, while sometimes uncomfortable, are really important.
And you're really good at communicating. I think
Thank you.
that was one of the assets we identified when we hired you. It's that, you've consistently stepped up to help get that information, and I think do it in a disarming way so that you can have that type of frank conversation. So I think this will be especially important as we move forward with this project.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
However it moves forward, I guess.
Just keep plugging.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, that was, I believe, what I had.
All right. Any updates from the select board here? On the horn? Good, good, good. All right.
Other than happy Cinco.
Yes, indeed, indeed. Our next meeting is March 22nd, which will be your last, Phil?
We'll have a special meeting apparently.
We'll have a special meeting before. We just can't get enough of Phil.
Yeah, that's right, we gotta squeeze
Just
one
don't
more.
push in another 2 months. We really punished Regina
We'll
with
move
that
that
one.
election back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the warrant closes on March 22nd at 4:30. As a reminder, the warrant closes on March 22nd at 4:30.
Okay, great. With that, I'll hear a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you. Second. Appreciate it. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, no. 5-0. Stay healthy, stay safe. We'll see you on the 22nd.